Joe Biden's advisor, Dr. Osterholm, says we need a 6-week hard national lockdown. But it seems like in many different circumstances, the Supreme Court is saying you can't do it. There have been already several rulings over the past year stopping many of these lockdowns. We just saw the Supreme Court ruling in New York, but it seems like we're still going to be going through this back and forth of those who think we should and those who think we shouldn't. But I bring this up because there is something else behind all of this, and it's called the Great Reset. The World Economic Forum said that COVID is an opportunity to reset global capitalism so that global stakeholders have a better, responsibility towards the planet. And the New York Times, the BBC, many outlets said this is all of this, and it's called the Great Reset. The World Economic Forum said that COVID is an opportunity to reset global capitalism so that global stakeholders have a better, responsibility towards the planet. And the New York Times, the BBC, and many outlets said this is a conspiracy theory. They call it the Great Reset conspiracy theory. Well, what they add is that the theory is there is a plan to reset global capitalism, but COVID was a hoax. That's not necessarily what the Great Reset is, and so when you Google it, it's really funny. You'll see the World Economic Forum saying the Great Reset opportunity, and then next to it, the New York Times saying it's a conspiracy theory. Well, regardless of the conspiracy stuff, I can say fine to the New York Times.
No, but
The
there is a
Hill has
conspiracy
recently
theory
published an
about
op-ed. John Kerry reveals Biden's devotion to radical Great Reset movement. And we can see in statements made by John Kerry representing the Biden administration in terms of climate change that they want to take advantage of COVID to move into a kind of lockdown that would help alleviate the problems of climate change. Considering what we've already seen, I can only imagine people will lose their minds and things will get really, really bad. So we're going to break all this down and talk about this news, as well as some other news pertaining to Kyle Rittenhouse. And it works out really well because today we are joined by the one and only Destiny.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me here.
And I'll just let you describe yourself, do a quick intro, because I don't want to,
Yeah, so I do politics and gaming on which camera looks at me? Who do I look at?
That one right there.
That guy? Okay. Yeah. I do politics and gaming on Twitch and YouTube. I go by Destiny there. I don't know how I would characterize myself politically. Probably center left to far left, or if you're a communist, on far right. And yeah, otherwise, we just run down. I'm a huge riding for Biden supporter.
Are you really?
Oh, yeah. 1,000,000%. Love him. I hear him described as Obama 2.0. Very much in favor of that. So I'm excited for 4 years of Biden. Maybe 8 years. Maybe he'll go for a second term. We'll see. Otherwise, maybe Kamala Harris will step in for the second term. And, oh, man, how exciting would that be? Most progressive voting record in the Senate, yes.
I think people, they always assume that, it's going to be some kind of internet blood sport. We clearly disagree in a lot of stuff. It's going to be a fun conversation. I think, we'll have some back and forth. It'll be great. I think you were mentioning, all that stuff because where you were looking at me as you were saying Obama 2.0 and all that stuff.
Yeah, it'll be fun, yeah.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, we were testing the limiters before this, screaming, seeing how loud we can go on the mics.
So we should be good to go. Yeah.
We have this thing where we can both scream at full volume and it automatically limits so that you don't blow your ears out.
You guys are welcome.
Ian's hanging out.
Yeah,
so this would be really interesting too. And of course, Lydia's producing.
I am producing.
And make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the notification bell. We are live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Well, let's just jump to the first story, and we'll talk about John Kerry reveals Biden's devotion to radical Great Reset movement from The Hill. This to me is really funny because they say the Great Reset's a conspiracy theory, but it's actually what they've been calling it for some time. The Hill says, in June, elites at important international institutions such as the World Economic Forum and the United Nations launched a far-reaching campaign to reset the global economy. The plan involves dramatically increasing the power of government through expansive new social programs like the Green New Deal and using vast regulatory schemes and government programs to coerce corporations into supporting left-wing causes. Obviously, this is, I think it's a biased view of what they're saying, but to be fair, the World Economic Forum has pushed a lot of left-wing causes as they've referenced the Great Reset. It goes on to say, the two justifications for the proposal, which has been aptly named by its supporters the Great Reset, are the COVID-19 pandemic, the short-term justification, and the so-called climate crisis caused by global warming, the long-term justification. According to the Great Reset's supporters, the plan would fundamentally transform much of society, as World Economic Forum head Klaus Schwab wrote back in June, quote, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies. From education to social contracts and working conditions, every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. They go on to say, Internationally, the Great Reset has already been backed by influential leaders, activists, academics, and institutions, in addition to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. The Great Reset movement counts among its international,
Oh wait, what the
there's a
fuck?
missing word
There's a
there, I
chain
suppose.
somewhere
The
in this
International
fucking
Monetary
room?
Fund, heads of state, Greenpeace,
Oh,
and
I'm a
presidents
dumb
of large
fuck.
corporations and financial institutions such as Microsoft and MasterCard. But in America, most policymakers, including President-elect Joe Biden, have been relatively quiet about the Great Reset, leaving many to speculate what a Biden administration would do to support or oppose this radical plan. They go on to say that at a panel discussion about the Great Reset hosted by the World Economic Forum in mid-November, former Secretary of State John Kerry, Biden's would-be special presidential envoy for climate, firmly declared that the Biden administration will support the Great Reset and that the Great Reset, quote, will happen with greater speed and with greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine. When asked by panel host George Brand whether the World Economic Forum and other Great Reset supporters are expecting too much too soon from the new president, or is he going to deliver the first day on these topics, Kerry responded, "The answer to your question is no. You're not expecting too much. And yes, the Great Reset will happen, and I think it will happen with greater speed and with greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine. In effect, the citizens of the United States have just done a Great Reset. We've done a Great Reset,
Ow.
and it was a record level of voting." Kerry later argued that the Great Reset is necessary to slow the climate crisis, and that, quote,
Great Reset
I know
sounds
Joe
epic,
Biden
dude.
believes it's not enough to just rejoin the Paris Climate Accords for the United States. It's not enough for us.
I mean, it
to
sounds like the
just
Great
do
Reset is
minimum
literally
of
just
what
getting rid of
Paris
whatever
requires.
Donald Trump has done.
So I'm not going to read literally every, the last bit of this. It's clearly an
Why not?
opinion piece, but it's talking about something that's actually happening. Lockdowns. I'm going to ask you, Destiny, your opinion, because you were mentioning before that you're for them.
Well, we're going to talk about the Great Reset, or we're going to talk about lockdowns?
Well, we're talking about the Great Reset for sure. I mean, unless you want to respond to that first.
Oh,
By
that
all
all
means.
sounded really cool, I guess. The idea that we have an opportunity to reorganize things based around like some kind of like ongoing crisis that might expose, weak parts of our economy or weak parts of, healthcare infrastructure, whatever. Like, I think the idea of capitalizing on those types of disasters and moving new programs forward, I think is really good. I think it's like pretty standard business practice too, right? Like nobody files bankruptcy and comes back the exact same way, right? Usually it's an opportunity to restructure your business, to get rid of stuff that doesn't work, to improve on stuff that does work. Like I don't see the horrible part about that. But more specifically, lockdowns or
Yeah, so I guess the general idea is that when they're talking about lockdowns, they're not talking about COVID. They're talking about the Great Reset and climate change. And that's the gist of what I get from John Kerry's statements. Initially, they said the Great Reset, of global capitalism, whatever, would be due to COVID. It's a great opportunity to do it, but then clearly, what their real concern is climate change.
just because you take an opportunity to, so I think it was Chicago, I think it was that had a massive fires and ravaged the city and they used the opportunity to rebuild a bunch of safety infrastructure. I don't think people were ever claiming they set the. I don't think anybody would claim that we want to lock down the country just to further climate change. There might be a way to make that
stop
argument,
climate change.
or to further climate change agenda, anti-climate change agenda. Yeah, that might be an argument that one could make in another world where we aren't topping ourselves every single day with record numbers of infections and deaths. Like if we were Australia or New Zealand and we were doing lockdowns continually, then maybe like, oh, hold on, there's an agenda here. But I mean, like we're losing Twin Towers worth of people every day. The idea that this is just a conspiracy to pass climate change agenda stuff seems like a hard sell to me.
I don't think it's that it's a conspiracy. I think it's that they're exploiting a crisis.
But that's good. Shouldn't we do that?
Not necessarily.
Isn't a crisis like one of your best opportunities to like restructure? Like I give with the example of like a failing business. Like if something really horrible happens, generally horrible things happen because they expose some type of flaw or defect in what you do. Like isn't that the time for change? Especially because that's when you're going to get the most like activism behind it.
Don't people have rights though? Like, don't you have a right to make choices for yourself, live your life,
Sometimes.
especially with the Constitution? So,
Kind of. That's a very vague sense. I mean, like, do I have the right to go out and get drunk and drive?
Well,
you don't.
Okay, so we have some rights, right?
Yeah,
Insofar as
so-
we're not infringing on the rights of others. So whether that's crashing in a
Going
drunk
on,
driving
dude?
accident or infecting
Your
somebody
mom.
with SARS-CoV-2, right? It's probably depends on what right we're talking about, I would
Yeah, I'm
imagine.
playing some
Yeah.
Skyrim
So
while
if you
listening
don't
to
want to
Destiny on
get sick,
the TimCast
then
IRL
shouldn't
stream.
you stay home?
If you don't want a drunk driver to
I'm
hit
not
you,
sure
should you
who
just
that
never
is,
drive?
but-
Well, that's different.
Sounds
That's
like fun.
someone who might be sick and doesn't know and is living their life under emergency
What was that?
circumstances like I have to make money and feed my family. There's no circumstance where you have to be drunk and drive.
There's no circumstance where you have to be outside.
I don't know
standing
who
right next to
any
you
of those
without a
people
mask
are.
or whatever.
Well, we're not talking
I know.
about that. We're talking. Well, I mean, if you want to criticize the Black Lives Matter protests,
But my
and,
third-
the Biden, you know,
My third
the big
mystery
Biden
skin
rally
shard
that
from
did when Biden won,
Prime Gaming.
then yeah, there's no reason for those people to
Dude,
be
true.
doing
I
this.
just
opened
claimed
up
You know,
it.
you can
myself.
simultaneously
I
criticize
got
them and the anti-lockdown
just
people too.
Dragon
It's
Slayer,
like,
so
I
Dragon
can criticize
Trainer,
both.
Pirate.
To my knowledge, a lot of the people were in those protests were
Oh, that's
wearing
tough.
masks, though. I mean, from what I saw.
Well,
on
in the Biden one,
Mm-hmm.
they were taking their masks off and drinking and sharing drinks was like one of the big videos that came around.
Sure, that's pretty
just
dumb. That's
one-
pretty dumb for sure.
For sure.
But
One-
I'm just more fundamentally, I'm just saying that like to come up with the like, don't we have rights? Well, yeah, I mean, of course we do. But I mean, we learned this growing up. With more rights also comes more responsibility. You know, like we
So-
have, yeah.
I think the drunk driving thing doesn't work. Like there's a guy in Staten Island who got arrested trying to run his bar. He has to. Otherwise, he becomes homeless and he can't feed his family. And then what? Did they beg the government for help? The government's not giving it to him. And you can blame Mitch
Well,
McConnell or Nancy Pelosi.
No, we could blame Mitch McConnell. Pelosi sent him like trillions of dollars of bills that are dying on his desk.
But we still had Democrats saying it was Pelosi's fault. You had Wolf Blitzer criticizing Pelosi. So I think it's fair to point the finger at both.
We're pointing a very short dwarven finger at one, and we're pointing like the nose of Pinocchio at the other. In terms of people fighting over specifically, you know, what is Pelosi pushing for, what is she not pushing for? There can be back and forth over that. The fact of the matter is, there was some like $2.5 trillion bill that was left in McConnell's desk when he moonwalked out of the Senate after they confirmed ACB. So I mean, like
sure.
the blame is not even remotely close to equal there. The House passed legislation, the Senate let it die.
That's true.
You can't both sides that one. I don't think, but.
I think that's whether or not it's me trying to do it. This is what people are doing, right?
Well, so Wolf Blitzer might have specifically criticized, like, "Hey, Pelosi, maybe
he cited
you could have gotten
Ro Khanna.
What?
He cited Ro Khanna. He was citing Democrats who were calling out Pelosi,
Mm-hmm.
and Pelosi didn't want to answer the question. So, look, if like obviously if you're on the right, the right's going to say, see, the issue with the HEROES Act was that they wanted fun, like, you know, they were stuffing things in it that didn't make sense, and the Republicans did the same thing. They wanted money for an FBI building. I don't want to go off on the you know, Democrat versus Republican.
Sure. Well, it's important because obviously as a huge diehard Biden fan, I'm going to fight viciously back against the idea that both sides messed up. The fact of the matter is that if I go into the Senate,
Wait, whoa! What the fuck?
For any type of coronavirus release, and Pelosi did. She delivered. We have that legislation. It's sitting on the floor of the Senate, and it's never going to
choose
be
what I
called for a
want.
vote. But
Well, so I want to keep it to
Yeah, to the
discussion
lockdown.
of the lockdown rights, the
Sure.
Great Reset stuff.
yeah.
So the government is clearly not providing for people, regardless of whose fault it is. You can say it's Republicans' fault, and absolutely.
Sure.
What is a working class, you know, man or woman to do when they're told, specifically in Staten Island, the issue was that this bar wasn't allowed to serve people, but 2 blocks away, everything was normal. They said this specific zone has been locked down. So when the guy said, "I have nothing left. I have nothing left to lose," the money that did go out overwhelmingly went to massive corporations. The lockdown is overwhelmingly benefiting.
The money should go to massive corporations, right?
No,
Why not?
it should go to the people who can then buy resources to go to the businesses to make sure they can cover their costs and their taxes.
Okay, so the PPP loans,
Yeah.
I wish I could remember what every word stands for, but the PPP loans were loans given to corporations that allow them to cover up to 2.5 months of employment expenses
Right.
when they paid employees. If they did that, then the loan was going to be forgiven. We still haven't gotten the paperwork for what that forgiveness looks like, but that's the point. So if I have one corporation that hires 10,000 people and another company that hires 10 people, well, of course more money is going to go to the corporation because there's more
Right.
payroll to cover, right? But it's not. But the corporations
it's a semantic issue.
No, it's not semantic.
No,
it's very
listen.
important. Yeah.
What I meant was not that a small business with 10 employees
Mm-hmm.
was getting money. What I meant was when the lockdown happens, the money ends up in the hands of the ultra wealthy. The stores that are allowed to remain open tend to be the big box stores, and that's why we saw the massive profits, the massive spiking in stock value for these big companies, notably Amazon. The working class people got $1,200.
Yeah, stock
Small
values
businesses-
are definitely a thing. But if you, I'm just talking very specifically because it's very important to understand each of these policies. So the PPP only works for you if you pay out employees. So I got a PPP loan. The way that works, the way that the paperwork details is that when I get that money, I can claim up to 2.5 times the expenses of all of my employees, and the only money that's forgiven for me is what I pay out to my employees. So for me personally, there were like 2 people that I kept on payroll just because, oh, well, the government's going to pay for it. Yeah, screw it. I'll take the PPP money, and then I'll continue to pay them out because it'll be forgiven. I only kept those 2 people on payroll because the government gave me that PPP money. And any corporation isn't going to pocket the money. It gets paid out to employees. It has to be.
Did they give you money to pay your rent, pay your taxes, pay your costs, replace perishable goods?
No, it was just to cover the cost of employing the employees.
So
Not to cover everything, yeah.
What happens to the lockdown is massive businesses, the likes of McDonald's, Starbucks, they can shut down and they can roll their
Oh, and they
eyes.
can absorb. Oh, 100%, I agree.
Small businesses
For
are being
sure.
destroyed. So that's the question. I said, don't people have rights? When these people we see now there's a West Michigan story going viral, where a guy there's a news report going on. A guy walks out of his restaurant and he yells to the news reporter. He's like, "Is this you? Are you talking about me?" And he said, "They've taken everything. The money is going to their friends. It's going to special interests. The bailout that came out, people did get a stimulus, and then money did go to small businesses." But if the small businesses are shut down and can't sell things, what happens? The restaurant, their perishable goods, gone. They can't reopen. So in New Jersey, a third of small businesses have been destroyed.
Sure. And I've heard similar in New York restaurants and everything. Like a lot of places that are closing are never coming back probably. It's a tragedy, of course, yeah.
So I guess to keep it in context of the Great Reset, talking about exploiting a crisis to make some change is also destroying the lives of people, resulting in spikes in suicide, spikes in crime.
I don't think we're locking down, though, for the Great Reset. I think we're locking down because record numbers of people getting infected and dying from the coronavirus. If we can do something on the backs of that, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. Maybe part of that Great Reset, and I'm almost positive without knowing the intricacies, I'm pretty sure that part of that Great Reset is probably going to be like more stimulus for small business owners. It's going to be covering healthcare for people. It's going to be more types of like checks or disbursements during like times of crisis. That's probably going to be baked into that Great Reset as well, because as you accurately pointed out, the relief that we got so far, even the PPP loans were a joke. And what is it? One $1,200 check, I think, went out to every American. That's like, it would have almost been better to send nothing, because that $1,200 is like a slap on the face. Like, what's wrong?
Do you know that 23.6% of all U.S. dollars ever created was created this year?
I was not aware of that.
That's crazy, right?
Doesn't sound too crazy. It sounds like probably the Fed is doing what it can to. The Fed's primary job is to reduce inflation and to curb unemployment. Which is funny because Trump always takes credit for low black unemployment, even though that's squarely in the job of the Federal Reserve, which has no oversight from the president. But the Federal Reserve probably sees that we are spiking unemployment as long as we're not raising in inflation, which we haven't been. Their goal would probably be some form of QE, quantitative easing, or super low interest rates or whatever. So yeah, that makes sense.
I think, first of all, I'd say I agree with you on a lot of these things. And also, if your perspective is the lockdowns are strictly because of we have this pandemic, that's an opinion, I guess. You know, you'll argue that you're correct. I think when you look at certain jurisdictions and you look at the World Health Organization saying it's a very last resort and should be avoided, and it can be, and they do it anyway, it sounds to me like, well, they've said it. They want to exploit COVID-19. It's their opportunity to enact this policy, and they didn't say it was because of COVID-19. They said it was because of climate change. So, should I disregard the World Health Organization's warning about lockdowns?
So I think
assume?
I don't know among major countries, because I know there are some small ones, but among every country, we're 11th right now in per capita death, and we lead the world in absolute death. I don't know what last resort sounds like to you, but that sounds like we're pretty close to like last resort there.
The people who this is the big challenge. Our economy is what did we drop, like 30% or like 30-something% this year?
Potentially, yeah.
People we're facing mass evictions.
Mass unemployment, yep.
The reason I pointed out the printing of money is that is absolutely not a solution in any capacity. It's a desperate last resort.
The lie about the PPP
thing,
the thing he received
money
and read
printer
the
go
document
burr,
himself.
desperately trying to keep the machine churning in some capacity. But if people ultimately stop doing things that give them the money value, then ultimately we're headed towards some kind of really serious economic collapse, especially
I'm not going to disagree with you here, and we talked a little bit about this off air. The problem is that right now we have the worst of both worlds, and that we are doing half-assed lockdowns that are locking down just enough to absolutely destroy small businesses and average workers, but we're not locking down enough to prevent the spread of the disease. So what we're getting is the disease is spreading almost uninhibited, or it almost feels like it's uninhibited. I'm sure it has been to some extent. And then we're seeing all these businesses close down, and because we're doing it in such a lackadaisical manner, like nothing is actually moving in a positive direction. We haven't eliminated the virus in any part of the U.S. We're still in like that map is in like purple spreading in almost every single state, and then people are suffering severe economic harm as well. Right now, whatever we're doing, if you were to ask me like, well, should we just not lock down anything, or whatever? If it was between just doing no lockdowns and doing what we're doing now, I might even say like, okay, yeah, like whatever.
I think that's it actually.
Sure.
The guy at the restaurant that I mentioned in Michigan, he straight up said, if the government gave me enough money to keep everything moving, I'd happily walk away for 2 months.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it really just comes down to
if we were going to shut down businesses, we have to support them through the shutdown. Right. You can't just expect people to stay home and have, we don't expect American Airlines or Walmart or any other massive corporation to have 6 months of savings, and these people are doing revenue in the 9, 10, 11 digits. Like, why do you expect, Frank that owns a bar down the street to, like small business owners aren't making tens of millions of dollars a year off of their businesses. These people aren't going to have the savings to get through 6 months of not operating their business.
It's a tough problem. I think you have a lot of people on the right saying, protect the vulnerable, social distance, wear masks, but reopen things. And then many on the left, I suppose, in your instance, lock everything down hard, but cover the cost to make sure people make it through this.
Well, the thing that sucks is it feels like, and this has been, I so look forward. I want to feel like this argument is never going to come back again, but I know it will under Biden. Republicans always cry about deficit spending, but for some reason, when they're deficit spending for their pet projects, it seems like it's okay. I don't understand why we got trillions of dollars of tax cuts from Trump that he celebrated about, growing the economy, which congratulations every time you
and the deficit.
Don't tax. Yeah, and massive debt. I think
he campaigned.
Biggest budget deficits under Trump of all time. Some of the biggest budget year-to-year deficits of all time. And I think the thing that leaves people frustrated is it's like, I don't understand why you can't help us. Why can't you give us money if you are spending so much on the war machine, which was supposed to go away, or on large businesses via tax cuts and everything? Like
seriously,
that's the frustrating part.
Trump campaigned against the deficit and the debt, and here we are. And there was an interview with Ted Cruz where he was like, well, Trump didn't campaign against that, and they're like, he did.
What the fuck is the left eye of Palmer?
Yeah.
I think that's an indication of political parties will say one thing, but as soon as they get power, you know what I mean? Like everybody wants free speech when they're in the minority position, and then once they're in the dominant position, they're like, no, we gotta clamp things down.
Yeah, maybe you want. I mean, yeah. I mean, a man carrying over $400 million of personally guaranteed debt probably isn't going to be the best person to responsibly manage a country's budget either. But
yeah, but see, that's a framing thing. You're right there, right?
So it is a framing. I'm framing that a man that has a massive amount of personal debt that he's personally guaranteed is maybe.
Well, what are his assets?
Probably enough to cover it, but probably not enough.
It's
that
like $3.2 billion.
But I think it was either Wall Street Journal one that went over that. Yeah. But anytime you're having to start to sell off things that you own to cover debt you're going to cover, it's probably not a good feeling. You can do it.
Yeah. Forbes, I think, put Trump at $3.2 billion with liabilities of like $400 million.
Something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want to go off on a news thing.
Sure. Yeah. It doesn't. It's frustrating to center back. It's frustrating to me and a lot of other people on the left, and I imagine on the right as well, that constantly hear about how we can't just spend all this money on you. But we could do massive tax cuts, and we could spend a lot of money on overseas wars, and that just seems very wrong.
Yep. Yeah, man, the war. You get me going on the war thing. Absolutely. Spending money doing nation building in foreign countries when we could be fixing the pipes in Flint and helping people in this country. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting thing. I think, ultimately what it comes down to with the lockdown debate is, I think if we work out all of those issues, what's left is, will the 2-month mass printing of money have a serious detrimental effect on the economy, the savings, and the
fund the government
of American people? Will it be a bad thing for them? Or if that's basically it, right? So conservatives would say we can't just print money, we can't just do that, we can't just lock everything down and freeze it, especially at this point, considering it's been a year now and businesses have been destroyed. And I guess the leftist position is you can and you have to.
Yeah, I guess monetary policies are very complicated. I know that there's always the inflation boogeyman that is looming behind every politically expedient argument, but it seems like we haven't seen that massive inflation yet. We've been running historically low federal funds rates for long times now. It just isn't there. I know that there's at least 5 libertarians right now in chat screaming that we need to go back to the gold standard and we're printing money and it's bad.
Do you see that Trump? I think it was Trump. He tried appointing a woman to the Federal Reserve who wants to be on wants to put us back on the gold standard.
That's very funny.
I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, but absolutely delusional. But yeah, no, I mean,
we need to get Ron Paul in here. So you can have an argument about what's delusional about
that. Oh. Wait, are you asking me, or would Ron Paul ask me that?
No. Like Ron Paul would clearly be like,
yeah,
"You're right, you're crazy." You're wrong.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Man, I was a huge Ron Paul supporter when I was back in college.
Really?
I was like 18, 19. Yeah. Oh
what the heck?
So let's do this. Look, man,
I think we agree that we have to go one way or the other. We're sitting on the fence. We either need to jump into we're going to lock down for 2 months, everybody's getting some kind of handout, or we need to go into okay, we're going to severely lax all the lockdown stuff, and we're just going to see who dies, but we have to keep people's lives running. Because there is damage, there is collateral damage to a lockdown that most people accept, even more so than suicide, not having a business, not being able to run anything, mental health issues. And there's a really well-known Twitch streamer that killed himself, most likely because of the lockdowns. A friend of mine that traveled a ton, and that was his way of getting out. I know there are a lot of people like that, maybe that not necessarily killed themselves, but severely negatively impacted in terms of mental health related to that. So yeah.
Wow, man. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of stories. There's this dude that I know, his son committed suicide. He was tweeting about it and said, having a young kid who's locked up, and with resources, this guy's a wealthy dude. Mm-hmm. It destroys their mind,
Not to mention that, I can't imagine. So I'm very lucky. I have a 9-year-old son because of because he lives in a wealthy school district, because I'm wealthy. they have long distance learning with like iPads and stuff. And even for them, even for that technologically very literate school district, I get the emails every day. I don't know if other parents have this issue where it's like, hey guys, if you got logged out of the iPads, you know, like this is how you get back in, or like it just seems to be like such a nightmare for everybody. I can't imagine the poor schools that can't afford that type of technology.
Yeah.
I don't know what those people do. You're out of school for like a year. Some people didn't get to have their senior prom. Some people didn't get to do their graduation. Like
I would have cheered for all that. You know, when I was younger,
I would have as well. But
very
I'm not
anti-establishment.
Well, I just want to stay home and play video games. But most people probably wanted to see their friends and socialize and do stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Well, so that's a good argument why there shouldn't be lockdowns. For the sake of mental health and everyone. And
potentially, or a good argument for why we should have had very strict lockdowns for
a very small amount of time, yes.
Started to do like much more controlled reopenings like they've done in Australia, New Zealand, or South Korea.
So then the problem isn't so much a conspiracy as it is two factions fighting and getting a half-assed response instead of one solid response to either.
The problem is that literally every single thing in the United States is so unbelievably politicized that you can't do anything without somebody looking at you like you have a political agenda behind it. And part of the reason is because of stuff like talking about the Great Reset. Like, on its face, if you were to say like, hey, if you are doing like a massive restructuring, do you think you should take that opportunity to optimize like part of your workflow? Every reasonable person would be like, yeah, probably, yeah. But like when it's phrased and then like, do you think that people are pushing for extra coronavirus lockdowns just so they can shove AOC into every person's home, forcing you to get on your knees and worship the Green New Deal? It's like, well, okay. Like I feel like the framing of that is a little bit disingenuous, and it further serves like that hardcore hyper-partisan politicization of American politics.
The World Economic Forum put out a video that said in 2030 you will own nothing and you will be happy. So when they then...
When you say the World Economic Forum, do you mean like one person who works in one subsection that does YouTube videos?
They published it. It was published on all social platforms. They wrote a big long article about it. And then they later clarified when there was a backlash that it wasn't intended to say this is what we want to happen, but what we think may happen. So the issue is if you launch a campaign around this, you include within it like critical theory, intersectionality and stuff, and then you say you will own nothing and you will be happy. And then people like Trudeau who say we're going to have a reset, people like John Kerry, are advocating for locking everything down, which is destroying ownership.
Sure.
It's like people. I'll put it this way: not that it's a grand conspiracy where they all got together and said we want to destroy ownership, but that they think it's a good thing, they like it, they've advocated for it, and now the policies they're bringing about are bringing about what they want.
Sure.
So you can argue, you can prove intent.
Yeah, I understand. The problem is that like I can't argue against a story. I can only argue against particular policies. So like if we are concocting this grand narrative behind the schemes that we're trying to get rid of ownership of everything and blah 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 and like this, like well. I mean, like, we have, like, a bunch of discrete facts, and we could connect them in that way if we want to, but I don't know if that's the most appropriate way to do it. And even on its face, I could even defend that statement on its face that actually a lot of people are in support of that you will own nothing and be happy. So as a gamer, something that's been very interesting to me is most people today use things like Steam as a platform. You don't own any of I don't know if you're familiar with Steam.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
You don't own any of those games.
Right.
If Valve goes bankrupt, you've lost everything.
That's
but people
a bad
are happy
thing.
with it. Sure, but the convenience that it provides is, you know, on another level, and that's why people like it. Or you don't own any of your music, you listen to it on Spotify, you listen to it on iTunes. We don't have the vinyls, we don't have the CDs, we don't have any of that anymore. So like I'm not defending the idea that we should own nothing, okay? I'm an ardent capitalist. I like owning things. I have all of my music is backed up on FLAC files on my hard drives that I keep it up because I like that. However, I don't think that these ideas are necessarily as crazy as we make them out to be because we give the least charitable reading of it and then run with the biggest conspiracy behind it instead of like, well, what's like a more nuanced like approach in the middle for like, what do they probably mean? What are the goods and what are the pros and cons, and like how can we work with this? I guess.
I think conspiracy implies that it's a secret of some sort. We'll just call it.
Yeah, that's not for me to say. Sure. When I say conspiracy,
no,
I mean like a
I've
plan of
used
people.
language too, right?
Sure. Yeah, I understand. When I say conspiracy, I don't mean like a crazy, lunatic. When I say conspiracy, I mean like a planned thing that multiple people are working on to bring about some kind of change. It's like a conspiracy. But it has a very negative connotation, so I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a group of people. They have international interests. They think we should use the COVID lockdown to reset global capitalism. And then there's people who don't trust the policies they're putting out when the World Health Organization themselves. I have the quote.
Sure.
Let's see if I can. Full lockdowns should be a very, very last resort and can be avoided, World Health Organization's Europe chief says. So this was in October. When you see the story, and it was basically carried everywhere. I'm using CNBC. People are wondering why then they're pushing for all these lockdowns. I don't want to.
I don't think
because
you're
so fucked.
Anywhere in the U.S., have we?
No.
We haven't even done a full lockdown.
Well, what do you mean by full lockdown?
Well, what do they mean by full lockdown? I imagine that the WHO probably doesn't mean, when they say like full lockdown, I doubt they mean like outdoor seating at all hours of the day at most restaurants.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, when they say full lockdown, they're probably saying like closed. Because I've been in California for a couple of years now, and I don't think we full lockdown anything. You can go to any, well, I shouldn't say a couple of years, but over the past years, like you can still go out to restaurants. You're just outdoor seating, or you're seating in every other place.
California says don't leave your home.
Don't walk around.
Well,
Don't drive your car.
past 10 o'clock. I think just recently they did that. I think Newsom said on Monday.
Right,
I think they just said like no more gatherings of 10 or more people. Yeah, but I think this is the first time Californians went this far. But even at that, I'm pretty sure restaurants are still open. Like I literally ordered Din Tai Fung like the day before we left. Like we went to the restaurant and picked it up, and there were still people eating out there and everything. So
it's interesting too, yeah, because it's the Constitution. There's only so much they can do to enforce this stuff. You look at Europe, and they had this video go viral of a woman who brought her mom to a mental health facility, and they detained her, tased her, she's screaming, and then naturally people are like, this is messed up. I mean, actually, you made it sound like you disagreed with Australia and New Zealand's approach to things, because Australia's been super draconian.
I don't necessarily disagree. I wish that we had a more three.
Wait, tell me
to do something. Because the way that when I grew up,
hold on, can I just take this first?
Being an adult is awesome, but there is more responsibility that comes along with that. There's never given a right to do something that doesn't carry a greater burden of responsibility behind it. Like that's always the case. And a lot of the times when I talk, it's so weird. When Republicans talk about rights, usually they're talking about restricting rights. I notice that anytime a Republican talks about states' rights, what they're actually talking about is taking rights away from you. They want to like curb like abortion, or they want to restrict access to like funding for like Planned Parenthood. They usually, or they want to make it harder to vote. For whatever reason, voter ID, or if you don't agree with that, make it harder, whatever. Like it feels like when people talk about like states' rights, or they or make it illegal for like gay people to get married, they're talking about like taking rights away from people, which is interesting.
Old examples.
Well, now they are, because the Supreme Court said. But I mean, there was that famous who was the woman that Mike Huckabee supported, who was saying like, I'm not going to marry these gay people even if they.
The clerk.
Yeah, the clerk.
Yeah.
So these are, thankfully, some of these are older examples, sure. But even regarding things like what do you call the cities, sanctuary cities, right? People like states shouldn't have the right to do that. We need to take this back. It feels a lot of the times like when people talk about states' rights, it feels like they're actually talking about taking rights away from people, which is.
It's not like a couple of those examples were just security.
Well,
like
I mean, what is security but the restriction of a right in exchange for, what's the quote? Like somebody that demands security in exchange for their freedom will get and deserve neither, or something.
We'll get neither and lose both.
Yeah, sure.
Well, but the argument, it really is, it comes down to freedom versus security, and at a certain point, you do need security. It's just a question of where the balance is, right?
For sure.
So
it's crazy to me that like people will look at like illegal immigrants and be like, we need to ship 13 million people out of here because a few people every year get killed by MS-13, or we need to get them all out of here. And then we look at like 3,000 people a day dying from the coronavirus, and it's like, well, do we really need to wear masks?
They're very, very different. They're very different. The issue of illegal immigration has a lot to do with the economy as well. Just a way more than just it has to do with the security of our elections, the security of our physical safety, and it has to do with the jobs market.
So elections, physical safety, and jobs market. The coronavirus is hardcore affecting all of those, right?
But
the election and all the mail-in voting.
You can't deport the coronavirus. And so the conservatives tend to say we should protect the vulnerable, we should have social distancing, wear masks, and we can keep the economy running, and schools seem to be safe. And then the left tends to say lock it all down, provide stimulus and support. So I hear what you're saying, early on, because we did go through this already.
I guess the thing that makes me sad is that like I grew up, so half my family's Cuban. My mom and dad were both Air Force. They're ride or die for Trump, like to the end of the earth. And my mom is an incredibly nationalistic, very proud American, loves his country, would if the Air Force called her back in today, she would, strap up in her little flight suit and go and fly to wherever they wanted to. I know she would. And it hurts when I grew up hearing about all these amazing things that America was capable of, that America had accomplished, and we did. Silent Generation, World War II, all that. We did a lot of amazing stuff. And then when it comes to controlling a coronavirus, individually, we can't take responsibility for this. We can't just wear a mask and stay away from people. Apparently, that's really controversial. We sucked at getting testing out because Trump didn't take it seriously. He didn't push for it anywhere near as much as he should have. We weren't able to enact any of the other measures that other countries.
That was a complicated point, though, but we'll come back to it.
I don't believe it was complicated. I understand that we can say that, like, well, some tests were put out and they failed. I think that in the United States, regardless of what some people say, I think that this country possesses the greatest technological innovation in the world. If we wanted to get tests out and if the political will was behind it, we would have had that out way earlier. Because South Korea Korea had the same first-day reported case as us, and they have I think they have 240 deaths from the coronavirus. Why couldn't that have been us? And South Korea is this entire little peninsula is like a metro.
But that's why it's easier for them.
That's harder.
No,
look
no,
at New York. That was one of the reasons why New York City got so crushed. Look, how tightly packed together everybody is, and all the international travel and everything.
Look how many different states with different jurisdictions, with different governors, all protected by the 10th Amendment. Trump can only do so much. And when you have New York City having their health experts come down and say everything's fine, go outside. You have people in California, of Nancy Pelosi, doing the same thing. There's an argument of who took things more seriously and who didn't. But ultimately what it comes down to is Trump doesn't have... Vosh argued Trump should use the constitutional war powers to just assume control and then force things.
So firstly, that would be insane. Imagine if Trump would be using executive powers in times of national security to do insane stuff like tariffing China or sending troops down to build the wall. I mean, he's already done this. These weren't even national emergencies. But I'm not in favor of Trump enacting it. It's because he shouldn't have done it there, but you could make an argument that he might do it here. Maybe he should. If there was ever an argument to exercise these powers, it would probably be in protecting a 9/11's worth of people dying every single day in the United States. I don't know if tariffing China is the same level of national security.
And that's why it's not a big deal.
What do you mean?
Well, Trump putting a tariff on China, people say for the most part, okay, we'll see how that plays out.
Well, no, a lot of people were very upset because he did this unilaterally, and he exercised executive branch powers to do it under threat of war or whatever, which is a little bit insane. So I'm just saying I don't agree with Vosh's argument, but if you're going to argue in favor of Trump abusing the executive like he has so far, it seems strange to make the argument that he shouldn't do it here.
Has he abused the executive?
I think that saying that we need to go that the border wall to the south is some horrible national emergency that he needs to send people down to build part of his wall or whatever, or saying that we need to have a national emergency tariff. I think that's very strange. I think that's an abuse of power. And then more importantly, back to what you said before, Trump can only do so much. Trump actually can do so much because he is so unbelievably popular in the Republican Party. Trump still has a 93, 94% approval rating in the Republican Party. If Trump went around, if Trump went around and told the governors, listen up, guys, we're going to close down for a couple months because it's your patriotic duty, blah, blah, blah. You better believe that any Republican governor or anybody that's in any plus Trump district is going to be in lockstep behind them because they don't want to lose re-elections.
In terms of securing the border, that is the power bestowed upon the president. If he's going to say the United States government, we need to protect our borders, we do. If he's going to do trade negotiations, it's something he would do.
Border policy and border legislation, though, that's clearly in the realm of congressional authority. This is stuff that should be passed through Congress.
This went through a series of checks and balances. Congress fought with Trump. They refused to give him the budget he wanted.
The Supreme Court sided with Trump.
Exactly.
Because he does have very broad powers. But, spiritually speaking, right? I don't think we would want Biden or Obama to come in and say oh, well, I'm going to open all the borders because I think it's good for our national security, right? I would say this feels like something that should probably go through Congress, I didn't like DACA under Obama, not because I didn't like the policy, but because it's okay, well, we can't get anything done through Congress, so now we're going to kind of broaden our executive powers and write immigration policy. And we see how horrible that is because anything that can be done via executive action
can just be rescinded.
Executive action.
So it can't. Trump tried to undo it, and the Supreme Court said no.
Well, I think
so technically it's true, but
weren't there parts of DACA that I think were rescinded? I don't know if that's still being fought in an ongoing manner, but
I know that they basically shut him down on several instances.
I know. It's complicated because they go back and forth. Executive order is just a really bad. There are parts of our government that people complain about. So the Supreme Court is one of them, and the executive is one of them, and they say that the power has expanded so much in these areas. But I think the reason why it appears that way is just because Congress has been so unable to do anything that's the only place that you can get any meaningful action out of.
So let's talk about Biden and Trump then. We'll expand upon this. You're super excited for Biden?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Why?
I think that we will finally, hopefully, have some cohesive idea of how we're supposed to deal with the coronavirus as a country from somebody that is not insane when it comes to talking about virus-related stuff. So no weird stuff about bleach or UV lights, no pushing weird medications like hydroxychloroquine that he didn't take when he was sick. No,
it was reported that he took it.
No, he said he took it as a prophylactic.
Oh, right, before he got sick.
But when he actually got sick, he got the good stuff. He didn't get that weird stuff that he was selling all the suckers on TV that worship and support him.
Hydroxychloroquine's
but Steam doesn't allow you to access those files without the servers being on.
For sure. So there were preliminary
studies. If I log out of
my
account, I'm pretty sure I can't access it. If I log into a new account, if I log into a new account, all of the games that are downloaded onto my computer, I can't access.
hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin,
you need to be logged into your account. So if the servers disappear and all the accounts disappear and nothing is being kept,
they actually replicated this in other studies.
Maybe you can access some games here and there, but a large majority of games you just won't be able to access.
So we even saw lefties write about this.
Yes, the games are on your computer. The save files are there.
About a news report, the media changes the narrative and says it's a bad
the server holds.
Well, the problem is it's not Trump's job
games. That's why
things. If a random tech
you can't just log into your friend's account and play all of your games. Like your friend can't just log into their account.
No, it was literally a study on COVID. And they found the severity was dramatically reduced.
You can't log into your friend's account.
Hydroxychloroquine have showed that it is nothing. It does not help with the severity of disease. There have been some retrospectives that when compared against different standards of care, like maybe, but the reason why it became popular initially was because that scientist in France, the Dr. Raoul, came out with his N equals 12 study that I think he dropped one person from that died, and after 1 week in, he was like, "Hey, we published the results," and then that was it.
There was a ton of past research that said for coronavirus and for SARS-CoV-1, hydroxychloroquine was effective in reducing severity.
Sure.
This probably led the scientists to say, let's try it out for
which is fine.
SARS-CoV-2.
Which is good.
They were promising results early on. But as soon as Trump said it, the media went nuts. That's
because
the crazy
it's not
thing.
Because Trump is a different person, and it's not his job. So here's part of the problem when Trump comes out and says it. When Trump comes out and says something that hasn't been thoroughly vetted by the medical community and isn't recommended by somebody who would be more in line to recommend that, like say somebody like Fauci, right? When Trump comes out and says it, it changes the worldwide discourse when it comes to these drugs. So there was a really good article published in Nature about some research scientists that complained about how hard it was when they were trying to run trials on other drugs, so dexamethasone and remdesivir or other drugs. Nobody wants to be in the loser trials. Everybody wants to be in the hydroxychloroquine trial. That's what Trump was talking about.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to risk being in the dummy trial for some loser drug when Trump is on TV talking about how he's taking hydroxychloroquine every day. It's not his job to do that. He's absolutely irresponsible for him to be on TV talking about that.
I disagree. I mean, he's going to talk about what he sees in the news. I'm not going to blame the president.
Is he like a Muppet? He sees something and he says something? This is the most powerful man in the world. I think that we can be a little bit
everybody does. What do you mean?
Trump is not everybody. Trump is the president of the United States.
And he gave a speech where he said, we're doing a great job. We're seeing some promising studies out of France. There's a hydroxychloroquine they're talking about. Should he not tell people that we're making developments and there's some promising, medications?
I didn't get the question.
The problem is that even if I was to grant you that, it stands in stark contrast to the reasons why he gave for never talking about the coronavirus initially, right? He's saying that, I kept all this stuff secret because I don't want to start a panic, blah, blah, blah. But now he's out here talking about all these potential miracle drugs and everything. I think that it is very irresponsible for him. I even get nervous talking about certain medications on my stream because I don't want people to run out and take it. And I know I have that power, and I'm not the president of the United States.
Right. I always just say, ask your doctor. Your doctor knows best for you.
Which is great. And if Trump said that, hey, there are drugs out there that might be trying to talk to your doctor, but that's not what he was saying. He was talking about, we got hydroxychloroquine, this great new miracle drug, and I think it's going to be the next.
Do you remember?
Who are you to say?
Do you remember what the White House said on school closures? The science is on our side. And Anderson Cooper, I think, said something to the effect of he just doesn't care about your children at all. I think Jennifer Rubin said he wants your kids to die or something like that. This was actually what Kayleigh McEnany brought up in a press briefing. Mind you, that's one. So I remember that narrative when Trump and the White House came out and said schools should stay open. Well, now we're finding out that even Fauci is saying, yep, but so much later that we've caused irreparable damage to many people's lives.
Dude, this guy's made $1,000 off of random as fuck donuts that nobody reads.
When Trump was actually
these people are just donating just to be seen.
Was that irresponsible when they said that
people can say different. People can say.
I'm just reading the super chats. I think that he reads the super chats later.
It's very obvious that Trump is pushing to open schools because he's desperate to get back to some level of normalcy for the election, because whether you agree or disagree with Trump, this election to a large extent was probably a referendum on how he dealt with the coronavirus and getting people back in schools and getting people working, because a lot of people don't know this. Schools can be two very important things.
Destiny comes up as such a weak
how your kid can eat sometimes, depending on how poor you are, and two, it lets mom and dad go and work.
Daycare.
Because, because daycare is unbelievably expensive. Oh, my goodness.
So public schools allows the economy to keep moving.
Yeah, but the problem is that when you're pushing for things on only a political basis, and it doesn't seem like you're laying out good comprehensive plans for so for instance, Fauci and I think it was even on the White House.gov site, have these plans for slowly reopening based on the number of reported cases, daily averages, moving, blah, blah, blah. If that was the type of thing that was being said, then I could have been more empathetic. I was like, okay, cool, it seems like Trump just wants to reopen things in a responsible way. But instead it was just we got to open all the schools, we got to get them back, we got to get back to normal. It was probably not the most science-driven answer he's given.
I mean, It's an opinion. The people who like Trump are going to say Trump cares about me and he's fighting for my family. The people who don't are going to say he only cares about the economy.
Why didn't Trump pressure McConnell to release any stimulus if he cares about our family so much?
Maybe he doesn't think stimulus is the right way to help families, and he thought that it would be devastating to the economy to just print money, and the best way to do it was to release the lockdowns, which is what Trump said.
But he thought it wasn't devastating to the economy to just cut taxes for like all the wealthy businesses, or to authorize the PPP loans.
He thought that was good for the economy. Okay. People think they're the heroes of their own story. You know what I mean?
Sure, I understand. It's strange that he thought that these were such positive measures, but he couldn't pressure McConnell to release any kind of stimulus to the average American person.
I think he said that the stimulus will be the vaccine, and we need to reopen because people should be working. So it's just I don't think there's mustache twirling villainy. I don't think
there's mustache twirling. I think he's just selfish and stupid. But the problem is we are months and months into this, and we got no other stimulus. He is our leader. Where was it?
How do you feel about Fauci saying early on that he was doing the best possible, that no one could do better?
Every time somebody contradicts Trump, they get immediately fired. Look at the, I think it was the cybersecurity head of the DHS that came out and said, well, this election was actually pretty secure, and Trump instantly fired him. So it's not surprising to me that Fauci, a man that's been working in government for 30 or 40 years or something, that he came out and was like, oh yeah, I think
he's been defying him for months.
He has been defying it, but there's a very careful line you have to skirt. If you've ever worked a corporate job and you've got an idiot manager, you know, like, you don't go out and say, like, why are you doing this? It's stupid. It's more like, maybe I kind of do. I think you're doing a great...
I get fired.
Sure, yeah. Well, if you don't want to get fired, it's more like, you're doing an amazing job. I think we could do a little bit better here, right? So
you think Fauci lied to the American people to save his own job?
Oof. I think that Fauci was saying things in the most diplomatic manner possible because he wanted to serve the American people. And I got immediately fired by Trump, which he would.
Saying Trump did the best possible job and no one could do better is a big difference from we're trying as hard as we can.
I don't know if he said no one could do better. I would be curious what the exact quote is. But even so, I don't think that's very relevant to policy going forward, whether or not Fauci says that Trump did a good or bad job. I don't know if it's Fauci's job in government to be second-guessing the president in his past decisions. It's Fauci's job to give us the best leadership going forward. And I know that there have been times where Fauci, and you just said it, right, has been at ends with the president and him like promoting certain drugs or him talking about certain things related to the coronavirus where Fauci says, well, I disagree here or whatever. And even I'm pretty sure there were a few months where we didn't see Fauci anymore because of his like behind-the-scenes fighting with Trump. But yeah, I don't think that just saying, well, Fauci said Trump was doing a good job. Like, wow, you think? Like Trump, the guy that fires literally every single person in government that's not immediately agreeing with him, like, it doesn't surprise me that he was like a little bit careful when he would publicly address Trump.
So on that note, the cybersecurity guy that Trump just fired, would it not have been in his best interest to say this was the most secure election we've ever had? That's literally him saying, I did a good job, don't fire me.
But it's that type of thing it's very hard. So like there's like two schools of thought in terms of like how to change a system. Do you go full renegade and say, this sucks, this is over, fire me, I don't care? Or do you kind of like suck it up, work from the inside, you know, like, okay, well, sure, this sucks, but like as long as I like keep my, you know, mouth shut, I can actually enact change on the inside. Like when the DHS guy came out and said what he said, I think that he probably felt an obligation to the American people to let them know the government doesn't stand behind Trump and his like election fraud claims. So
I feel like that doesn't surprise me.
So I'll read a little bit. He said, Fauci said, we've never had a threat like this, and the coordinated response has been, there are a number of adjectives to describe it. Impressive, I think, is one of them. I mean, we're talking about all hands on deck, is that I, as one of many people on the team, I'm not the only person. Since the beginning that we've recognized what this was, I have been devoting almost full time on this, almost full time. I'm down at the White House virtually every day with the task force. I'm connected by phone throughout the day and into the night. And when I say night, I'm talking 1, 2 in the morning, not just 1. So I can't imagine that under any circumstance that anybody could be doing more. I mean, obviously, we're fighting a formidable enemy. This virus is a serious issue here. Take a look at what's done to China, and, you know, he goes into, it's a really long, I don't want to read the full, it's a really long paragraph.
Sure.
The gist
it sounds
of which
to me
is,
like he's like, as who's kind of become the face of this virus, he's like championing, like, yeah, we're doing everything we can in the government, which is kind of what I would expect him to do, is to be like a cheerleader for the government. I don't expect him to come out and like, these guys suck, our coordinated federal response has been non-existent, Trump is a horrible leader. Like, I don't think that would be his job, and it would probably send a bad message to the American people as well, right?
If you know, the criticism of Trump is that he was downplaying this early on to avoid a panic, and that was a bad thing, then isn't there responsibility on Fauci?
The problem with if you want to say that you're downplaying something to avoid panic, that's fine. But the problem is that while he was downplaying it, there weren't steps being taken behind the scenes to prepare us for what was coming. It seemed less like downplaying it to avoid a panic and more pretending it didn't exist and hope it didn't come to American shores. Because there's a difference between publicly saying like, okay guys, listen, I don't think this is going to be a big deal. And then behind the scenes, you're like, okay, listen, we need to get testing on board. We need to make sure that we have some form of contact tracing. We need to like communicate with governors to make sure we have something. Like there would be that, but instead it was just like, well, look, we locked down travel from China, LOL. And then in a month and a half, we did nothing. Oh, well, look, we locked down travel from Europe, LOL. And like that's it. Like I don't think that he was just trying to avoid a panic because there was nothing going on behind the scenes in that gap of the China and European travel ban to show that he was taking it seriously. It seemed he just didn't think it was a real thing.
Let's talk about Biden.
Sure.
What do you like about Biden?
So one thing was the top-down, hopefully some sort of top-down level response we get for related to the coronavirus. That respects court rulings and everything. I don't know if we've talked about it yet on air, but the Supreme Court did decide that it's an infringement of religious freedoms, which is probably fine. I can understand that ruling from the Supreme Court. I would hope that churches would individually say like, okay, well maybe we'll suspend sessions, but I can understand that. But some top-down coordinated response from the government related to coronavirus. Number 2 and 3 are closely going to be intertwined. Is going to be like the economy broadly and healthcare broadly. I'm very interested to see what sort of economic policies we're going to see from Biden, especially in regards to his strong support of unions, and especially in regards to, I don't personally like the policy, but pushing for a 15 an hour minimum wage. I'm very curious to see like where that ends up. In terms
Bad news.
Why do you say that?
So he wants to combine that with a high corporate tax, yes?
That's bad.
And he's also been, as part of the Obama administration, very much in favor of free trade agreements.
I love free trade agreements.
Well, so you know what the combination of those three things will get you. Corporations facing high wage costs and high taxes will just move their factories and their businesses overseas.
Well, that's part of what you have baked into any multilateral trade agreement, though, is the idea that nobody talks about this on the right or the left. One of the nice things about free trade agreements or multilateral trade agreements is that obviously what you just said can happen. Okay, you if you're going to make it so that I can export my supply chain to a place like Vietnam, well, I'm just going to make all my stuff over there because I can pay those workers way less. However, generally, as part of negotiating these free trade agreements, you usually demand some labor standards on the side of other countries in order to bring them onto a more level playing field so that you're not exporting all of those jobs. So 2 really good examples of this is one, is it the I can't remember, the United States, Mexico...
USMCA.
Yeah, USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement. Agreement, so part of this agreement that Trump champions all the time was, I think they demanded like an increase in wages for Mexican workers that work in certain factories to try to dissuade people from exporting too many jobs over there. And then another good example is part of the negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, obviously dead now, but part of those were historic labor reforms in Vietnam that would have bolstered a lot of the labor rights in that country. And a lot of those just completely went away as a result of the TPP negotiations falling through.
It's good for Vietnam, but it's not good for American workers.
Well, if you force them to pay their workers more, it is good for American workers because the increased liberalization of trade means we have another trading partner we can buy and sell stuff from. But the fact that you have to pay their workers more means we're not just shipping all those jobs overseas because they still have some minimum level of wages that they have to pay to discourage that.
There may be those negotiations on labor rights, but the cost is still remarkably cheaper to have our factories all throughout Southeast Asia and here in the United States, and we've seen that. We've seen the fact that we don't produce our own medicine anymore.
Sure. I mean, this is one of those like insanely multifaceted things that I agree with you in practice. It becomes a lot easier to spread supply chains throughout the world because it's cheaper in certain areas to manufacture it. That's not always a bad thing, but it's also a thing that we could combat if we would have more honest conversations about like what is a multilateral free trade agreement supposed to accomplish. So for instance, the Paris Climate Accords. So very common criticism that nobody on the left talks about is that these things seem to give a lot of leeway to developing nations. Like why would I join any type of pollution?
We need to pay. We need to compensate.
China and India compete uninhibited with now my shackled economy that can't pollute.
Right.
Like this is insane. But the only way that we can address those types of concerns have to come through multilateral trade agreements. That's it. There's no other way to do it. China is way too big as a country. A few tariffs or a couple sanctions aren't going to do anything to them. They have access to the rest of the world market. You have to get together with a bunch of countries to set these standards.
It didn't work. We thought that the trade with China was going to normalize China and make them freer and better, and they went the other direction.
Well, so this has been something I've read about this since the 90s. This has always been like the China conspiracy. People are always saying, I say conspiracy, people are always saying that like when China, when the middle class booms, when they increase their trade, like they're going to become more liberal, the people are going to demand political freedoms. Doesn't seem to have happened, but I don't think we necessarily need those things to happen. I think we can acknowledge that China exists as this kind of like, authoritarian behemoth that is going to do what it's going to do. But the only way that we can accurately deal with that is to partner with other countries in order to enforce like the kinds of restrictions that we want on them. We can't do it on our own. Like we've seen Trump try to do it with tariffs. It doesn't really work that well. He keeps saying over and over again, we brought them to the table, but like not really. The big things that we were pushing for related to like intellectual property rights and things, we didn't see any progress there whatsoever. China continues its Belt Road Initiative all throughout Europe and Asia and everything. Like it's
either there. I think there's two outcomes in this China issue: full-scale warfare or capitulation.
Okay, how I'm going to suggest kindly a third option. What if instead of every single time something bad happens in the world and we all hide from each other and get scared and locked down, what if we continue to reach out, be the world leader that we used to be in the whole NATO world and everything, where we tell other countries like, hey, let's all work together on this common idea, and then we pressure China that way? Couldn't that be like a better way to do things?
But hasn't that been exactly what they've been trying to do that's not been working?
Well, I mean, there have been a few key events, especially recently, that have kind of pushed people into a lot more kind of a scary area where they're worried about working together. So the 2013 Syrian refugee crisis, for instance, caused a whole wave of governments in Europe to have...
Thanks, Obama.
Well, to some extent, yeah. Although Bush got us largely involved with the Middle East originally.
But Syria was Obama.
Yeah.
But the whole... okay, sure.
It's complicated.
Well, I'm sorry, you're right. It was the CIA.
No, that's too communist.
This is
so I mean, like the existence of like ISIS that exists in Syria and gained power in Syria, like a lot of that came from the destabilization that started in Iraq, and a lot of that came from
it's a super
Bush
multilateral.
I'm not saying that Obama is absolved of this. I think that Obama could have done a better job foreign policy wise, but it's hard. It's very difficult, and nobody has gotten that right.
Do you know about the Qatar-Turkey pipeline?
Qatar.
I believe I've heard of this, but talk to me more about it.
The reason why the U.S. got involved in Syria
because the idea was to get Syria locked down so that they could run that pipeline all through
Syria through Turkey.
I've heard this from people, yeah.
But it's true. In 2009, I think it was actually no, maybe it was 2009. The Guardian reported that in 2009, U.S. intelligence said we will have a ground incursion in Syria because they have refused to give us access to build the pipeline, saying that they would not go against their ally Russia. What Russia and Syria were then planning on doing was using Iran to tap the same well and run that pipeline into Europe, strengthening the Russian gas monopoly in Europe. So the U.S. had planned for years before we actually ended up on the ground. And then funneling weapons to rebel groups they eventually came together and we got ISIS.
That is a story that one could tell, but I don't think that everything that happened in Syria was just a result of the United States wanting to secure an area for that pipeline. That might have been a nice side objective that maybe could have come about. I know that the United States probably wanted to see Assad gone, and if he was gone, it wouldn't surprise me if we wanted somebody loyal to America or American interests in there. And if that did happen,
let me clarify. Sure. The Guardian reported that in 2009, the U.S. wanted to be in Syria. They needed an opportunity to do it. When the Arab Spring happened, the United States said, now's our chance. Provided weapons and resources to the rebels, eventually put U.S. soldiers on the ground. Now we're involved in that. And the same. And look, that's why, getting into the Biden discussion about war and conflict, bringing up the Syrian refugee crisis was a product of, yes, Bush, totally, and Obama ramped things up.
In regards to the Syrian stuff, yeah, for sure. In regards to... Another reason why I say foreign policy is complicated is like a lot of people are critical about Obama and the and all of the drone strikes and the killings. Was it an American citizen I think we killed in Yemen?
We killed. I think Obama killed 4 American citizens.
Yeah, I know there was one that was like super ultra heated.
16-year-old in Yemen.
Yes.
Obama signed off on blowing up a civilian restaurant in a country we aren't at war with, and when they asked him why did you sign off on killing the 16-year-old, they said we were trying to target somebody else, a terrorist leader. Oops. When people followed up saying, why did you authorize a drone strike on a civilian restaurant in a country we aren't at war with, it's just womp.
Sure. All those same drone strikes and all those same bombings have only increased under Trump, though.
Not in the past few years, but yes,
absolutely in the past few years.
No, they've actually been going down quite a bit.
They might have gone down from where they started the administration, but in the 4 years we've had Trump, in his first 4 years, he has done more drone strikes and more foreign bombing than either Obama or Bush did.
You're correct. And hiring Bolton was the stupidest thing the man could have done.
We still have troops in Afghanistan. We still have troops in Iraq.
But he's trying to take them out.
In Syria. What do you mean he's trying to?
He's been trying to get rid of them for a long time.
Why hasn't he?
Because did you know that there was a federal official who lied about the amount of troops we had in Syria to trick Trump into keeping them there? and that when Trump said he was ordering the troops to withdraw from Afghanistan, both Democrats and Republicans got together and blocked him in Congress. Trump fired the Pentagon civilian leadership, and this was reported by the AP, in an effort to get loyalists who would finally pull our troops out of these countries.
This is one of those things where I wish I knew more information about it, but I completely do not agree that that is even remotely possible. You're telling me that the president of the United States that was able to get the Supreme Court to say, well, I can tariff China for national security reasons, couldn't control where we were deploying or withdrawing troops from? That sounds unbelievable, especially when he was unilaterally approving strikes on like Soleimani and like Iraqi airports and stuff.
I know, it's messed up stuff for sure.
I find it very hard to believe. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump was using this as an excuse, but I mean, even if this was true, like, you've got a guy that says he's a business leader that's supposed to be on top of handling all this stuff, who, like, one guy lies to him and now he has no control over his military. He's the commander-in-chief. This is literally the primary job of the president.
There are a lot of people in government who are doing everything in their power to obstruct Trump.
And most of them are Trump appointees.
Yeah, I know. It's one of these. Trump's hired a bunch of dumb people.
So at
like,
what
come on,
point,
man.
But you have to
the fact
ask
that he
yourself,
hired Bolton. It's
but
like
you have to ask yourself, at one point, is it no longer the deep state's fault? When the deep state is 50% Trump appointees, maybe Trump is just highly incompetent. Look at the rulings that we're getting right now on the election fraud stuff. These are Trump federal judiciary appointees that are coming back and saying, like, listen, man, you are insane. These affidavits are crazy.
There's no joke at this. Like, there's no. I can't believe the defense I'm seeing for what's going on in these Trump lawsuits. Trump put out this 46-minute video, and I listened to it, and I'm not gonna mince words. Trump did not present his case.
Well, they talk through the same, like, it was a 46-minute on Facebook. I think I watched the same video. Usually there's talk through the same, like, 7 affidavits every single time.
There's way more affidavits. There's way more articulate individuals presenting evidence, and for some reason the Trump team is not bringing it together.
Well, maybe it's not as legitimate as some alternative media suggests it might be.
No, I think the issue is when you hear Trump do a 46-minute video and he can't actually calmly cite Matt Brainerd, and he points to a picture and says, "Look at that. How does that make sense?" I'm like, you're not giving me an articulate breakdown of what the issue is.
Why is it that in all of these federal cases where these are being brought and the judges are actually over
the Trump campaign
40.
has 3.
Oh, maybe the Trump campaign personally.
You can't tell me that some random people filing a lawsuit is reflective of Trump.
You can't tell me that an affidavit alone is like valid evidence that like something horrible's happened.
It is.
Okay,
witness testimony is evidence.
Okay, well, in that case, there's a 13-year-old that has an affidavit out there, meaning they've signed it under penalty of perjury that Trump raped her.
That was retracted, though.
Sure, but a lot of these affidavits are also under scrutiny, fall apart as well.
Evidence is not proof.
Evidence
is not proof.
That's
right.
So we'll talk about it. But I'm just saying that, like, just because there's an affidavit doesn't mean that this absolutely happened. So, for instance, when
I agree with you. You're right.
Sure, when Giuliani brought the Miss Johnson, what was the name of the Indian lady that testified for so long in front of Michigan?
Yeah.
It was like Johansson or Johnson or something. But like she came and she gave a lot of the exact same testimony that had already been stricken down in court. So for instance, she talked about being in like the TFE voting center, and she was like, the election officials told me not to verify signatures, and I don't know why they were doing that. And when the judge went through it, he was like, well, that's because that wasn't your job. They were verified before they even got to you.
Let me ask you a question. What's the point of an observer?
What is the point of an observer? It super depends on every individual area, I would imagine.
So
broadly speaking, probably to observe, I would imagine.
To observe what?
The matching of signatures on ballots or whatever when they're opening and closing all those.
Would you agree with the judge who shot down this actual Trump lawsuit, saying that so long as an observer is somewhere in the building, it counts as legal observation?
It probably depends on the precedent set by prior cases.
Doesn't that sound bad faith?
What sounds bad faith to me is that all of this stuff was brought up after it was shown that Trump had lost the election. Where were all of these complaints on election night?
Complaints that
that observers weren't allowed in, complaints that the Dominion voting systems.
They were all over Twitter.
They absolutely were not.
Yes,
there were a few random tweets.
Let me just cite Will Chamberlain, who was on the ground going throughout Philly. He's a lawyer, posting in photos and videos. People were complaining about being booted, but you got to understand, a lot of these people aren't on social media. They don't know what to do.
It's not about just being on social media, because part of the reasons why these federal judges are throwing these cases out, so specifically in regards to that Indian lady, because on election night, none of these people were actually complaining. It wasn't until Giuliani went around soliciting affidavits days later or weeks later that people were asking, are
you a witness? Do you have evidence? Yes, I do. Please come forward. That sounds like the normal thing you have to do.
Doesn't it sound a little bit strange that none of these people were complaining? None of these people were complaining?
Imagine if a judge said, we're not going to use this witness testimony because the witness to the murder only came forward a month later after a cop found him. That's ridiculous.
It was more like all this widespread wrongdoing was apparently being observed.
They have to collect
but
the data.
But they weren't. Why didn't they go through any of the proper channels to report any of this?
Like what part? They did. I think you just don't know this. Like Matt Brainerd specifically said he gave his information to district attorneys.
I might not know this, but none of the federal judges that have reviewed these cases apparently know this either, because that is one of the most consistent reasons why these get shot down. It absolutely is.
So do you know what the basis of the Pennsylvania lawsuit was?
Which one?
Trump's got one Pennsylvania lawsuit.
What is the basis for that one?
That vote observers weren't allowed to actually observe the ballot process, the counting process.
Okay.
The court ruled that so long as an observer was somewhere present in the building, whether they were allowed to actually observe is meaningless because the election code doesn't specify distance. That is one of the most insane things I've ever heard come out of a person's mouth. We know why vote observers exist because we have photos from Bush v. Gore of people staring side by side up at the ballot, arguing over whether or not it was Bush or Gore.
Wasn't one of the Pennsylvania cases that they won, the small one, wasn't one of the cases they won was when somebody related to the Pennsylvania election stuff said that we were going to allow people to vote up to a certain length in time, or it was something where like what they had said wasn't necessarily bad, but the judge came out and said, listen, even though that's not really bad, it's not in the purview of your job to do that. You're not allowed to do that. And I think that was the one case that they won, and I think that was in Pennsylvania.
I don't think that was a Trump campaign specifically.
That might not have been their lawsuit, but that was the one lawsuit in Pennsylvania for a small handful of ballots. But like if the code doesn't specify, or if it's explicitly not specified, then I mean, like, what case do you have? What standing do you have there then?
That
also,
judges interpret the law, right? So when the law says, as per election code, observers shall be there to observe the vote tabulating process, we know that the spirit of that law, the reason why we have it, is so that you can have scrutineers making sure someone isn't going, Trump, Trump, Trump. So no, that was Biden. But they put people way far back behind plexiglass walls. And the Trump campaign said, why were we not allowed to observe? And
why would they challenge any of these laws before election night?
Because the law, there's no ruling on it. First of all, do you understand what injury in fact is?
That you need some
there has to be damages
in order for them to bring
so when the Trump campaign did sue beforehand, the Supreme Court reserved their right to judge to issue later on the basis
for
of
what?
They sued over mail-in voting. And the court
This is a totally unrelated thing now.
There's a bunch of different lawsuits. There's a bunch of different arguments.
Sure, but now we're talking about, like, I'm talking very specifically about, we can talk about the Dominion voting system, or more specifically, we're talking about
voting system stuff.
Sure, about the observer stuff, right? If this all was codified in state law, and the law is there, and we've held prior elections, we just had elections 2 years ago, why didn't nobody challenge it before election night?
I'll explain it. You can't sue on the basis of clarifying what the law really means until you have injury in fact.
It doesn't have to be suing. Believe it or not, there are other ways in this country to change laws. There are legislations, both at the state and federal level, that can change these laws. You don't need to sue to change anything.
If we pass a law saying you have a right to observe as I count votes, right? Do you reasonably believe you have a right to look at me and the votes? Why did anyone think a judge was going to say, nope, it didn't specify that you had to actually see the vote so long as you're in the building? Come on, man. That's unreasonable.
You're saying, come on, okay? Trump for months, because they knew that they were going to get destroyed on the mail-in ballots. Trump for months was calling out the mail-in ballots. And guess what? He was doing that far before any lawsuits had to be filed.
He was doing it years ago.
Far before any injury occurred, okay? They were calling these out. Why didn't they call it anything related to voting observers? The reason why is because they know it's all BS. They know that this fraud didn't happen. 1,000,000%. Because if I was somebody that had a massive vested interest in making sure that these elections weren't going to be rigged, I wouldn't be calling this out after Joe Biden wins.
Hold on, man.
It's probably something that you would have brought up beforehand.
You can't be serious that you think it is reasonable that so long as an observer is somewhere in the building, that counts as observing the vote counting process.
You can't be serious that you think that the only reason that they would challenge this is because, like, well, now they've lost the election and now this is the first time they've noticed it. These laws have been in place in some places for decades.
And in previous elections, people were allowed to actually look at the ballots. No one knew that this time that these precincts, specifically Pittsburgh and Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, were going to bar observers and they'd have to sue over it.
Okay,
they didn't last time. Why would they know?
For a big Tim Pool prediction, not taking into context, do you think they're going to win any of these lawsuits in a meaningful way? Not like there were 4 ballots and a mail-in thing or whatever. Do you think that they're actually going to win?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
First of all, when a judge says, did you have observers in the building? And the Republican says, the amount of observers in the building was a non-zero number, but we were not given meaningful access to the votes. And the judge says, well, according to the election code, it doesn't specify the distance by which you can observe. Therefore, you have no grounds to sue. That is clearly bad faith. If Trump is going to lose, it's going to be for 2 reasons. Many of these judges, and one judge even said this, if you think I will, he said, you can't expect me to rule in such a way that would disenfranchise millions of voters. That's absurd. I can't do that.
That's not all he said.
No. I'm bringing up that point specifically.
There was a very important second part to that, and he said, I can't do that with no evidence. He said that one would think that if somebody was coming to me to disenfranchise even one vote, that they would be coming with a very strong case with lots of evidence, but let alone millions of votes to bring such a shoddy case built on poor legal arguments with no evidence or shoddy evidence, that was the full quote for that.
So the point I'm saying is there's an unwillingness to take such a massive and unprecedented move in a court.
Without evidence.
There is evidence.
There isn't, though.
Just because a judge said without evidence doesn't mean there's no evidence.
Not just one judge, but people have gone through so many of these affidavits.
Are we talking about Trump's lawsuits or random other people?
I guess I'm not. I don't know 1,000,000% the distinction between only Trump's lawsuits and all of the other ones that have been brought up so far.
People have been rooting and cheering for Sidney Powell, and look at what happened with Tucker Carlson when he was like, "Where's the evidence?" They ripped him apart. They left Fox News, and now many Trump supporters are going after Sidney Powell because they're saying she's actually a Democrat trying to undermine the Republican Party.
Well, of course,
it's the craziest thing.
Because anybody that's not lockstep with Daddy Trump is immediately castigated.
No. Well, for sure, but people are so adamantly behind Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood. It's crazy. Like when I tweeted that it sounds like Sidney Powell's getting her information from conspiracy forums. Oh, people started tweeting me like crazy.
No, brother.
They've been making fun of me like, oh, how dare you? Now what? She's contradicting Trump. Like that stuff. I keep saying it over and over again. You come out and want to claim that this company was founded in Venezuela, Smartmatic, and then Sequoia and all this stuff may be true. That's totally fine. But, bro, you need extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. When we're talking about a judge in Pennsylvania and the lawsuit wasn't about fraud, this is another thing that the left keeps doing. Trump has specific lawsuits pertaining to the validity of mail-in voting and absentee voting, deadlines, etc. So in these court cases, the judge will ask for a simple clarification. Are you alleging fraud? No, Your Honor, we're not. They'll take a clip of that and say, aha, this proves it. Trump is saying there's no fraud and the lawsuit isn't claiming it. Yeah, he didn't sue over fraud because that requires long-standing investigations.
Was that the confusion then was because some of these judges were trying to figure out what standing they even had then to be there. Because initially it felt like the thing that I feel when I read the differences between what's being reported in these court cases versus what Giuliani comes out and says is Giuliani sounds like he's alleging some massive widespread election fraud.
Absolutely.
But then when it comes to them talking in front of a judge, it's like the meme with the little dog and then the shredded dog, and the shredded dog is like Giuliani in front of the cameras alleging fraud, election conspiracy, and then when he gets in front of a judge, he's like, okay, I'm not saying fraud, but like I don't think this lady was allowed to be in an area where she was supposed to be, and it's over like the smallest minutia ever, and they don't even have good evidence for what they're doing.
I think it's fair to say that the Trump campaign is not delivering in terms of the legal process by which they go after fraud, 100%. I also think it's fair to say that the legal strategy over challenging voting systems and ballots is a legal strategy, and that's
I wish that strategy, if it's something that they so deeply cared about, I wish that they would have done that prior to the actual elections.
No, but you don't understand, man. How could they have known that the observers wouldn't have been allowed?
Maybe they could have specified it in the code. It seems like Trump has every other conspiracy theory in his head about how he's going to be disenfranchised. You don't think having people observing the vote would have been like an important thing?
The law existed, though. They had them.
Apparently
they
didn't specify
the distance.
And I don't even know what.
The distance.
And also, I'm giving you a lot here because I haven't read the exact verbiage, because I'm willing to bet that when I go back home and I actually read through the case, it's going to be more than just like they had to be anywhere in the building.
That's literally what it was.
My guess is going to be that it's probably been consistent with state laws over all prior elections, and it hasn't been a big deal before, but now people are just really mad because of the massive increase in voters for Democrats on the mail-in ballots, and that's why everybody's losing their mind over it.
Let me ask you, should we have scrutineers, people who look at the ballots as they're being counted from both parties or even a third party?
I don't know how these elections normally run. That sounds like
normally
it would
what
be
they do.
Good. Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a decent.
Is it okay that this time they didn't do that?
I don't know if that's the case. I don't think in the majority of places that is the case where it wasn't.
No. This is specifically the Pennsylvania suit.
Yeah, specifically in some
Philly
few
and Allegheny County.
Yeah.
So you have these videos coming out where people are standing 100 feet away with binoculars, and they're like, I literally can't see anything.
One of the most important lessons I've learned in my life is to never believe anything I've ever seen in a Twitter video. I've learned over so many things. I don't know what the video, what time.
Sworn affidavits.
What was it? I don't know. It
Multiple
was
sworn
you
affidavits.
Or somebody else that I'd heard just recently say something about like all of these votes are being reported by machine. Like you don't see people walking around votes. We did literally on election night. You saw people like delivering votes and stuff to county houses and stuff. They're bringing them from other counties. Like when it comes to videos, I don't trust any of that on the internet without like a greater story or context around it, because anybody can take one video of anything.
Sworn affidavits.
Look at this. Sure, sworn affidavits.
So sworn affidavits in combination with the videos.
The sworn affidavit is interesting.
And them saying, we can't see, we can't actually observe the votes. So a big portion of what Giuliani is bringing forward right now in Michigan and these other places.
This is somewhat boring. It's more interesting than
all of these. A lot of these people are coming forward saying they're not allowed to actually observe the vote count. So when you have unprecedented rule changes, no excuse mail-in voting, which in the instance of Pennsylvania now, a judge recently issued an opinion citing that it seems very likely the plaintiffs will win on the merits, that this is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court shot it down on a narrow ruling that it was too late to sue on this, even though they just found out about it.
Brought it out. They just found out about the law? They just found out about the acceptance of late mail-in voting?
That it was in violation of the Constitution.
Why, they didn't succeed initially? You know what it sounds like? It sounds like they lost and now they're going back and trying to
find... It certainly does.
Okay.
I absolutely agree with you.
Sure. Which makes it hard to believe in good faith any of their arguments.
But that's not how the legal system would work.
Well, according to some of these judges, that's explicitly how the legal... So, for instance, in some of these rulings I've read, the judge explicitly will say the fact that she didn't follow any of the chain of command or the fact that this person didn't report any of this on election night is very damaging to their credibility.
Why would it matter if the lawsuit was now or later when they weren't asking to do anything to this current election?
The reason why it matters is because if these things are happening and they're only being reported retroactively, it seems like it's in a response to Biden losing, to Biden winning rather than to any actual fraud.
But if it wouldn't have an impact on the election, then it's irrelevant.
What do you mean?
The lawsuit wasn't asking to do anything to the current election. They asked the courts to issue their advice on relief, meaning perhaps in the future we won't do no excuse mail-in voting. The Supreme Court said it's too late to sue for this, dismissed with prejudice, meaning these people can't bring these cases up ever again. What's interesting is that the lower court ruling was that it would have been detrimental to several of the plaintiffs who actually won their elections. Mike Kelly won and then sued, saying, we didn't realize that the Republicans passed an unconstitutional law. And the judge actually issued an opinion saying, as this would be...
How did you not realize somebody passed the law?
They realized the law was passed, but many people didn't know that it was unconstitutional.
What changed? Did they read a tweet? Or
they read the Constitution. No joke.
After election? They didn't do that when the law was being passed? Isn't that part of like your job as a legislator?
I'd be willing to bet there was somebody who was looking at what's going on, what can we do, and the motivation was very much, Trump is losing this. However, the lawsuit wasn't brought by Trump. It was brought actually by a guy who won and several other people as well as a guy who lost. So it was a mixed bag. And they weren't asking for the election to be thrown out. They were asking for the courts to advise on what relief could be. Sean Parnell sat here just a week ago and he said, I don't want anyone to be disenfranchised. I don't want, I'm not saying this vote has to be thrown out. This election has to be thrown out. We all thought this was constitutional. I'm just asking for maybe the court will advise us. Maybe they'll say, hey, we need a constitutional amendment. So from this point forward, we're going to say no to this, no excuse mail-in voting moving forward, and then you get a constitutional amendment. You know what's really crazy about it? When the GOP was passing, the Pennsylvania GOP was passing Act 77, which is no excuse mail-in voting, they actually started the process to amend the Constitution and halfway through stopped, changed some wording, and then it got passed, signed off on by the governor. So this is a bipartisan approval. Most people didn't realize what had happened.
Wait, that doesn't sound like a bad thing on its face at all. If you were going to pass something and then you realized it was going to be unconstitutional, so you got to change the Constitution, but then you realize, well, hold on, if we reform some of this bill...
No. You said reform. I said they changed some of the words.
Okay, so laws are the words that make the laws.
Let's not play semantic games.
You reform. When
you say change some words, like
that means reforming
I can change some
the
words and make anything else. What do you mean by that?
So let's not play semantic games. Let's define it. When the Constitution says absentee ballots require specific excuses to be allowed,
okay,
and the law they initially presented was no excuse absentee, they changed absentee to mail.
Okay.
That's it.
Are there an entirely different set of provisions that come in under mail-in ballots versus absentee? Is there a whole different part of their state legislature that has a different way of dealing with it?
It was the same thing.
The exact same thing?
And that's why the judge in the lower court ruled the plaintiffs will likely be successful on the merits. And then the higher court said, we're not ruling on the merits. We don't know. It's just too late.
Okay. Well, sounds like they should have brought it up beforehand then.
They're going to the Supreme Court.
Okay. That'll be interesting when it goes to the Supreme Court.
So
one of the issues that I have when people keep saying affidavits is that on the first hand is it feels like somebody sliding down a mountain, grabbing branches or whatever as he's going down. Like initially we're grabbing all the mail-in ballots or voter fraud. Then we were saying, we've got the Dominion voting machines are made in Venezuela, and then somehow Hugo Chavez is coming back to life to blah, blah, blah.
No. Stop. Mm-hmm. First of all, the Dominion stuff is nuts, in my opinion.
I know. That's crazy. I can't believe these machines existed for so long and no one said anything about them until after the election.
In 2006, CNN reported on it.
What did they report?
They reported that they were completely insecure and there was a bunch of problems and all this stuff.
And one of the things specifically that they reported is stuff like a lack of paper trail or no ability to audit these machines, which has been some of the stuff that has been corrected and fixed in almost every single state that allows these machines to function.
Hold on. You said Hugo Chavez came back to life.
Sure.
No one's argued that.
Okay, I'm just hearing Chavez's name a lot recently.
Because Smartmatic, there's a WikiLeaks release from 2010. This has been on the internet for over a decade. Cablegate, where they say in 2010 Hugo Chavez was providing, resources to a group of individuals in Venezuela who are the principal owners. And if you travel through all these different shell companies, you find it originated in Venezuela. That's where that Hugo Chavez comes from.
Sure.
I feel like the argument that Hugo Chavez came back to life is an attempt to ignore what's actually being presented.
Well, I'm attempting to make the people sound insane because they are, to assume that there's some wider play by some other country.
But why are you doing that? You don't need
ridiculous.
To. You don't need to.
I think, because I do a lot of humor, so I think it's funny when people invoke Chavez so much to try to scare people into thinking that some machines are stealing our election.
But to say, like, this narrative that confuses the actual argument from people.
Wait, what is the actual argument?
The actual argument is that going back, a decade plus, going back 20 years, there was a series of companies that were started with the express purpose of being able to hide through audits that votes were manipulated. There is a company, Smartmatic, that was involved in this and has ties to Venezuela as per diplomatic cables that were leaked 10 years ago. So we've known about this for a long time.
Why did the DHS and the Department of Justice...
I'm not saying it's true.
I'm
not saying it's true.
But it's ridiculous.
I'm saying the difference...
crazy.
There's a difference between what these people are actually arguing and coming out and saying Hugo Chavez returned from the grave.
So on the level of these Dominion voting machines, if any of this was true, it would be the largest political news story related to elections in the past 100 years.
Do you trust the media?
To report something like this? This
No.
is like Pulitzer Prize winning related
They won
reporting.
Pulitzers for the Russiagate stuff.
Sure, well, there was a lot of good reporting and a lot of credible indictments that came out of that, unlike the Benghazi and the email hearings. But regardless, I'm just saying that this level of election fraud would be like an unimaginable, unprecedented
What were the indictments related to Russia?
So one had to do with the Internet Research Agency, which was funded by the Kremlin, which had a whole bunch of foreign influence.
But those
in
were
terms of,
foreigners, not Trump and not the Trump administration.
Correct, yeah. There were no indictments related specifically to Trump's cabinet, although we did get some indictments kind of like around that.
Right.
So the Manafort stuff came out of that. Flynn got caught lying to the FBI, although Daddy Trump pardoned him. Cohen went down for the New York-related stuff and the election fraud.
The crazy thing about the Manafort stuff is, they found out about that?
What did they find out about it?
How they found out about Manafort?
I read a lot of weird stuff. They
Politico
went through some guy's office and they found a ledger that was like written on a piece of paper, or whatever, for Manafort for owing him money and stuff. They didn't report to the State Department and stuff. But go ahead.
Politico reported that Ukrainian operatives were trying to sabotage Trump, and so they sent documents to a DNC operative, and then she, passed it along saying, "Here, we got some dirt. Go after him," and then they did. So it was political. It was, political.
So all
warfare.
of Manafort's charges were just 100% doled
I'd say
up
all of it.
political.
They found out about a lot of his documents because it was passed off for political reasons.
All right.
If
That shouldn't be surprising to anybody.
Sure. I don't know how that absolves.
I didn't say it did. I just said it's interesting that, we've got Ukraine stepping up. We've got this, political battle. People are trying to go after each other.
Yeah, I'm sure people are trying to send people dirt about other leaders literally all the time. We had Assange and WikiLeaks and they're doing all of that for a long time for the left. We also, as a result of all those indictments, found out a lot about how the DNC was penetrated via the spear phishing stuff by the Guccifer 2.0 hacker and everything. We saw a lot of that in the indictments as well.
Some people should not be... Some people don't know how to use computers. And a lot of people with access to really important information, But let's not. We'll derail. Go back to the voter stuff. The point is on the Pennsylvania point that I'm bringing up is we got a serious conundrum in terms of voter observation. It is, I think, widely accepted that we should have observers making sure that people aren't falsifying the vote count.
Sure.
Do you agree? If the Pennsylvania court just ruled that's not the case, should we change it so that is the case?
I would have to see on the specific ruling for that argument, because more often than not, when people cite these, usually they're leaving out some key. So I would have to go and read it specifically.
Let's just say,
I think you should probably have people observing the election. I can't think of a reason offhand why you wouldn't. That doesn't make sense to me. But I would have to read into why they made the ruling they did.
So check it out. The issue would be then if the judge made this ruling on the grounds the election code doesn't specify distance. I mean, then why wouldn't, say, Trump 2024 just be like, we're cleared. We got a ruling from the court. We know what we can do now, and you can't sue us unless you have injury in fact. Therefore, when it comes time to election, all Republicans bar all Democrats, and we can't lose. We can write down whatever numbers we want.
If you want to, yeah, go for it.
So it's a serious threat to our election integrity.
It could potentially be. And if somebody were to bring it up in that manner, I'd believe them when they said that. But right now, it just feels like Republicans are doing anything they can to try to flip the election results.
I think yes, 100%, and I think the Democrats. I don't think they tried to flip the results in 2016 for the most part. There was a whole lot of the Hillary can still win stuff. And
Hillary conceded the next day.
But
absolutely not even remotely similar.
It's remotely similar.
Not
I would say
even,
it's
maybe
not,
like
it's
the
not
way
same
that
thing.
Antarctica is remotely close to like Pluto.
Do you see the videos of celebrities saying the Electoral College must vote for Hillary Clinton?
Do you think there's a difference?
Well, I'm sorry, they
between-
didn't say that. They
do you
said,
think there's a difference between celebrities saying something and the president of the United States trying to undermine the election? That's why I'm saying these aren't
undermine?
remotely similar. Yes, undermine.
See, that's framing.
Well, it's when you say so.
Legally
In 2016, Trump said millions of illegals voted. He asserted that with no evidence. That's undermining the integrity of our election. And then in 2020, he's saying that there was widespread election fraud that literally no agency, no other credible person has backed up, save for the melting head of Giuliani. Like no one else is backing up on this. His own DHS turned on him on this with his own appointee. His own attorney general, the sword and shield.
What did he say?
Barr came out and said that as of right now, there is no evidence of widespread election fraud.
Wait, there's more to that quote.
What else?
That would have changed the outcome of the election.
Would have changed the outcome of the election? Okay.
To date, we have not seen evidence that would, on a scale that would have changed the outcome.
What
of
else
the
did he say too?
What else?
He also said that they looked into the Dominion machines, and based on their analysis of it, they didn't see any evidence
Right.
also that those machines were filming votes.
I think the Dominion stuff is over the top. Look, you got
Sure.
you got Brian Kemp and Brian was it Brian Kemp is his name, right? And Raffensperger.
Okay.
Are they both Brian? Or was it
I don't
Brad
remember.
Raffensperger?
Okay.
I'm mixing their names up or something. But these are Republicans. I don't think there's a grand conspiracy where members of like the Trump supporting Republican Georgians are like, aha, now is our chance. But people really believe it.
Yeah, they do.
I think for one,
Partially because a lot of people play into it. You do as well, right?
how do I play into it?
When you're tweeting
I just
stuff-
straight up agreed and said it was nuts.
Sure, I know, but it feels like a lot of your rhetoric gives a lot of credence or credibility to a lot of the lawsuits that challenge, like how the election is being, like the fact that you're willing to say that you think that do you think that the election, the majority of the election was legit? That
Yes.
maybe there were a few, but you think for the results stand.
I think what people need to realize too is you don't need widespread fraud to alter the outcome of an election.
You would.
No, you don't. You need maybe one person in 4 key districts. To put
Absolutely not.
Or one person with a USB stick.
Absolutely not. That's not how these work.
It is.
It absolutely is
I
not.
actually was in Vegas at DEF CON when they hacked the voting machines. I watched them do it.
I don't know what voting machines they hacked, but hacking one machine or hacking a series of machines is a lot different than the step-by-step process that goes through tabulating results, reporting to different
But they all
counties,
go in
having
the
them
machine,
fact-checked.
right?
Sure, but there's
And
also
then-
paper trails behind all of these votes as well.
And they didn't. Did they do a hard signature audit?
I don't know if they did.
They did a risk
They
assessment.
have their risk assessment audits and everything.
Trump's
but
been-
there is a paper trail behind every single thing. But now the problem is saying, well, for some of the ballots that were taken to the mail-in things, they've been separated from the
And
things,
they
so
destroyed
can't
the ballots.
verify or whatever.
That's a problem. They destroyed. So with the observers in Pennsylvania, they destroyed the secrecy envelopes. So now it's like, what do? They destroyed them before anybody could check to see if they were legit. Why would they do that?
So you believe the election is legitimate as it stands, but maybe there are some things we could fix going forward? Because that's a stance I could maybe.
I would say, as of right now, I said this, and I got ragged on hard for it on September 7th. I said it on the 8th, I think. No, it wasn't the 8th. It was the 9th because I took a day off because I was like, everything's crazy. The simple solution is Trump got Ocean's 11. That if the cheating, as I would frame it, is the mass changing of rules well before the election, using COVID as a pretext when Act 77 was even passed in October. The Democrats did everything in their power within the system to give themselves advantages. They were going door to door. They were doing democracy in the park. They were doing illegal. Democracy in the park was illegal. The vote raffles that we just saw emerge, all these videos through all these different swing states, was also illegal. There's no evidence as of right now. I should say there's not enough.
Have people been charged over this democracy in the park stuff, or
there
what?
was? I would say not yet. I don't know.
Okay.
But I will say there was one person so far charged with 135 counts related to basically getting infirm people to vote and signing off documents for them. There's currently a case going to I think the district attorney in Pennsylvania, where they found several thousand ballots all filled out in the same handwriting for Joe Biden in the names of elderly people in various nursing homes. So this stuff happened. It exists. Can I say that this is the reason why Joe Biden won? I can't. So I'm not going to... I do not agree with Trump when he says, I lost due to a rigged election and widespread fraud. I say, well, there's evidence of fraud. To the scale that it would have generated a flipping of the election, I would say no. There was impropriety that would have changed the outcome of the election. But what we're talking about with Trump's lawsuit in Pennsylvania is disqualifying 682,000 votes because they weren't observed as they were counted. And as Giuliani said, Mickey Mouse could have filled them out. That is not fraud. That is them saying we should disqualify these votes in an attempt to win because they weren't allowed to observe them.
Sure.
I think it's a problem that people weren't allowed to observe them properly. I don't know that disenfranchising the state is the appropriate path
I
forward.
think that's mostly agreeable, sure. I would say for life pro tip for people in the future, or anybody either playing video games with friends or trying to run a country, if you have severe problems with the way that rules are, it's usually good to try to change the rules before you lose. Otherwise, everybody's going to look at you sideways, wondering if you actually care about the rules or if you're just trying to get them changed to change
But
the
they're
outcome.
not trying to change the rules with the observer
Well, in
thing.
terms of like saying, in terms of specifying the distance or in terms of like having observers in a certain area or whatever, it sounds like they want to refine these rules to some extent.
I think that hasn't gone to the Supreme Court yet. However, there's a Trump supporting lawyer, a friend of mine, his name is Will Chamberlain. He said it's not going there.
Sure.
The Supreme Court, he said it was on appeal. So you saw that court case where the Trump appointee was like, get out of here.
Okay.
They appealed it, and that case was them appealing just to have the right to amend the argument in the first place, and they said, get out of here. So
well, if this is the same one that I'm thinking, the reason why they told them to get out of there is because I think that this was a Trump case, right?
It was, yeah.
They'd amended this case like 5 or 6 times, and I think Giuliani
once.
showed up.
They wanted to amend it for a second time. That was it. And so what
I wish I could remember exactly what this was, but I know that I watched. There was one because there was a legal analysis video of one of these that Giuliani got thrown out of court because they had moved different lawyers on and off of this case so much, and then they pushed it back, and they tried to amend the case so many times that eventually the lawyer was like, "Hey,
you know why they changed
this is
lawyers?
a joke. Like, get out." I know you're not gonna say because of threads.
Yeah, a bunch of high-profile verified leftists, the Lincoln Project posted the phone numbers of lawyers. And then within a day, they said, "Please, judge, let us leave the case." Like that's the only reasonable. That's the only reason they did it. The judges quit the case after being threatened and harassed.
So I've had, unfortunately, a lot of bad experiences with people with higher education. That makes me wonder sometimes. But I would feel like it feels to me that it would be pretty obvious. And if you're a lawyer, you'd probably understand this. That if you are going to be working on a public lawsuit, you're probably going to get a lot of public backlash. They weren't ready for any of that. I'm not saying that's good. If the Lincoln Project is posting phone numbers, that's pretty abhorrent. However, it feels more like they probably left because they saw the case was meritless, rather than just like, oh, we got death threats, so we decided to walk away.
That's possible too.
Highly improbable to me.
Yeah, I feel like
that's possible too. But that's
ever since OJ, right? Like,
okay.
More so, I would say, if we get the Lincoln Project, a bunch of news stories were published saying, Republican PAC, anti-Trump Republican PAC, publishes private information. Twitter forced the tweet down, and then within a couple of days, the lawyers put in an official request to leave the case. Our only chain of events is this. So I think the simple solution is they were threatened and harassed to the point where they said, we don't want to be involved anymore.
Sure. I guess it's just surprising to me that a lawyer would say, I can't believe my information went public on one of the most public lawsuits being filed in the world right now. That's very strange to me.
Ever since O.J. Simpson,
and how come all the other lawyers, who are not getting harassed are staying on?
Why are the other lawyers aren't getting harassed at all? I find that hard to believe as well.
I'm
sure that any public name that's on any of those filings is probably going to get a ton of death threats.
The Lincoln Project publishing your phone number is probably very different from just being a law firm on one of the suits.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But
so
did you watch the Project Veritas guy that they originally had that was going to that had signed the affidavit saying he was told to backdate stuff or whatever that O'Keefe was talking?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever listen to the full interrogation of this guy when he retracted his? Yeah,
I did.
So one of my worries for the affidavits, that and then reading through some of the judge testimonies, a lot of these affidavits are people, they're being truthful, they're signing what they believe to be true, but the problem is their observations are just not bad like they think they are.
Did you hear what the guy said after?
Well, after O'Keefe brought him on and buttered him up some more, he was like, no, I got mind controlled or whatever by the interrogator. But if you listen to the interrogator, everything that they walked through was like, it was pretty obvious the guy's claim was way farther than he ever could have made.
I disagree.
The guy literally walked across the aisle to the desk and he's like, hey, if I'm talking... Because the guy had said when he was across the aisle, he's like, I very clearly could hear him saying, like, we need to post-date or backdate some of the ballots. And the guy's like, hey, can you hear me over there? And the guy, like, doesn't even respond. And he's like, hey, hello? And the guy's like, oh, yeah, I can hear you now. And he's like, okay.
So you think the guy made it up in the first place?
Got plenty.
I don't think that he made it up. I don't think that he's that malicious. I think he probably heard a word or two and then maybe extrapolated, and then his mind probably ran with it after that. Is what it seemed like based on that, like, 2-hour interrogation.
A guy hearing something and then being like, I can't believe that happened, and then telling someone is probably more accurate than a federal agent coming in and saying, sit down. And he says,
oh my God.
What did he say? I'm scaring you right now. Like, did you hear that stuff?
Yeah, of course.
So what do you think happens when some regular, like, kind of dopey dude is sitting there and a federal agent is kind of drilling him? You didn't hear it, did you?
No.
You can't hear it, can you? You're right. Don't worry. Everything is for you. We're scaring you right now.
So
it was a creepy.
Oh
it was a
my
creepy
god!
recording.
It wasn't. It was totally
no. It was
fair.
totally normal.
The guy had originally stated that he had heard crystal clear, like across across his whole office, that he'd heard some.
And he
people
signed
talking.
a sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury.
And so did plenty of people signed affidavits for a lot of different things, right?
Sure.
But
witness testimony is evidence, but it's not definitive proof.
When it came time for him to actually talk to the guy, he walked back almost all of his strong claims that he couldn't hear the guy talking across the hours, and maybe he didn't hear 100%. He was told to backdate things that and I listened to the entire interview, and it sounded pretty fair to me. If the guy had accurately heard it, because initially he did feel a lot more confident when the guy asked a few questions, he started to kind of falter. And the statement, and I know O'Keefe likes to clip out 5-second, powerful statements saying yeah, I'm putting a little bit of pressure on you because that's what you do when you ask
watched the
people
full
questions.
thing.
Sure. So did we listen to all hour and 45 minutes?
It was not look, I used to work.
Wait, it was not what?
It was not a calm, reasonable discussion trying to affect.
It was totally calm, reasonable. Oh my god!
The guy spent half the discussion
joking around with him and being
friends with him. The guy being interrogated was like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to law enforcement, or I wanted to go into criminal justice."
Yeah, half the interview was them talking about military shit.
It's so cool. Yeah, you're probably smart. All of this. Seeing the police tactics, the investigator was playing good cop 1,000,000% the entire time.
It doesn't mean he's not pressuring the guy and playing upon putting memories in his head. He even said, "We want to pressure you so that you can make memories." And did you remember when he said that, right? He said, "We want you to, when we pressure you this way, then you can form memories."
I'm pretty sure exactly what he said was that when we pressure you, you're more likely to remember what actually happened, is what he said. That under some pressure, the truth will come out or whatever it was.
Yes,
ultimately,
that's
I think
100% true.
On this one guy.
Sure, well, it is just this one guy, but I noticed a pattern for a lot of these affidavits that what'll happen is that somebody will file an affidavit saying oh yeah,
and then they go to court,
and then when it comes
they find out,
what did you see? And it's well, I was in this room and I think I saw a thing, and the actual claim.
Well, did you actually hear?
Is actually way less than the super extrapolated thing that ends up on the affidavit. Is what it feels like to me. And
I
that's
don't.
what's been borne out in the court cases too.
I don't think the affidavits go particularly far. Witness testimony is evidence. Sure. It's used in criminal court cases all the time. I think the best evidence we have so far is the Voter Integrity Project. Are you familiar with Matt Brainerd's work?
Take your pick.
Is he the statistician guy?
Yeah, he's a data.
Oh God, I might have. If he was in front of Michigan, where he tried to explain.
No, he wasn't allowed to testify in Michigan, I think.
Oh, okay. Then that was a different data scientist.
I think that was right. He
went out there, so we were supposed to have him, and he went out there. He's like, I'm going to testify there, and then he's like, I was not able to testify. Really
gotcha.
sad.
Okay, must have been a different guy then.
What he did was I believe he purchased the publicly available data from several swing states. He then hired 3 call centers, and he gave them a list of questions to ask. Did you request an absentee ballot? Did you send in an absentee ballot? Things like that. And he found in a bunch of different circumstances, that was one of the things they did. They also cross-referenced the National Change of Address database with people who voted. They found, I think, I could be getting the number wrong. Was it 20,000 in Georgia?
Yeah.
I think
20,000.
So. This sounds right. 20,000
people in Georgia who had changed their addresses, voted in their new state, and voted by absentee in Georgia. That's they've actually published parts of the database. You can see the names. He also found, I think, tens of thousands of people who listed commercial addresses with fake apartment numbers in Nevada. I think it's 11,000 or so. That's legitimate, hard evidence.
So was that going to show up in a court case? Where
the FBI took it already. Okay. So the FBI proactively reached out to him, and this was
how long ago did this happen?
4 days, 3 days.
Why? How long ago was Barr's statement where he said the FBI had looked into things and it didn't look like there was?
Barr said to date.
But what was that to date? How long ago did Barr publish that statement? Wasn't that just a couple days ago?
Yes. We haven't seen evidence on a scale that would have altered the outcome of the election.
Okay.
Something to that effect. The FBI just reached out to Brainerd requesting. This was reported in a few outlets. He mentioned it. We'll see if anything it comes of it. But this is one of the reasons why there was a big backlash between people on the right and what Barr had said, and why Barr then clarified the next day.
Oh, you walked in the I fucking hate you.
And we'll take any credible report, or whatever. So Matt Brainerd is probably the best evidence. But again, it's not definitive proof that there was an outcome, changing the outcome of the election. I'm not saying that, maybe the FBI did review his data and they said, well, these 20,000 are 50-50 Trump or Biden, so it wouldn't have changed anything.
Possibly.
Maybe
the problem, too, is that, and again, I hate that I'm not familiar with a specific thing, but I know in front of Michigan, they would testify that, oh, well, here's evidence of voter fraud as well. There were 120% of the
voter
people,
turnout.
or not voter turnout, but of the registered voter or whatever here. They would use these expressions.
Right.
I
know.
But the reality of what had happened was, some people moved, the voter registry isn't updated, or some people move here, but this isn't evidence of voter fraud. It's just evidence that there needed to be an update in the registry.
One of the biggest problems in Trump's argument, and a lot of conservatives bring this up, is when they're like, you'll see a tweet where they say there's 7,836 dead people on the voter registration in this place, and it's like, yes, because they died.
And they haven't been purged or
are you saying they voted? Because that's a different, so I hear that a lot from the right, and I'm like, that's irrelevant.
Exactly. Without proving that they voted, you need
if you have proof they voted, then all of a sudden we're like, whoa. And there have been some instances, but I think in one instance,
there were a couple where like somebody sent in a mail-in ballot and then died before the election. I think I saw some of these in like Louisiana or something.
I misread something and tweeted like, whoa, dead people voted, and then I went back and I was like, they voted and then died.
Yeah.
But there were some instances that some mainstream outlets found where there were a couple dead people who were found to have voted.
Sure.
So the issue there is there voter fraud? Yes. And the Heritage Foundation has a list of it. Is it widespread to the scale that it changed the outcome of the election? That's not been proven.
Sure.
That's the best way I can put it. Obviously, the left will say, of course not. The right will say, of course, yes. The reality is there's evidence. There's crazy evidence, but it's not been proven. And I don't think it will be, to be completely honest. I don't think, and a lot of conservatives agree with this, that you have an apparatus that could even investigate on this scale 150 million votes to figure out who did or didn't. The Matt Brainerd stuff, the Voter Integrity Project, is probably the scariest stuff we have so far. There's a guy named Nashon Garrett. He's a collegiate, is that how you say it? Collegiate wrestler training for the Olympics. He lived in Arizona. He moved to Tennessee. He got a phone call from one of the call centers asking if he requested an absentee ballot. He said, no, I voted in Tennessee. I moved here a while ago to train for the Olympics. They said, you didn't request it. You did not submit one. He says, no, I didn't. They said, somebody requested and submitted an absentee ballot in Arizona in your name. And so he then went public, went on Fox News and said, that's not me. I didn't do that. That's crazy. I'd like to see an investigation and some prosecutions and or at least at the very least investigations. Maybe there's no prosecutions because we don't know where it leads to. But if you've got people changing their addresses and then voting, if this database thing on the National Change of Address database from Brainerd is correct, and he has 20,000 people in Georgia who changed their address but voted in two different locations, either they voted twice or someone voted in their name. We got to investigate that.
Sure.
Especially if Trump supporters are outraged and demanding clarity. The crazy thing to me is that at a time when this country is dramatically and hyperpolarized, the Democrats, confident in their win, should be like, please, Trump, take the resources you need to investigate and compare signatures and do what you need to do so
Why
that we
would
can
they
then
let
tell
him
you we
do
won
that?
definitively. Instead, it's...
But they're doing that.
They're not. They're blocking
They
it.
are.
There's
Actually, no.
They've been doing all of these
DNC and
investigations, or they've had all these court cases and all these.
I don't know.
No,
I
the
feel like
court
it should
cases
be
are not
done.
investigations. The DNC
No,
is
actually, fuck it. Yeah,
countersued,
just
and the
let them
ACLU
do
is
whatever
countersued,
they want,
blocking
whatever.
the Trump lawsuits. So they're not cooperating, and they're arguing against it.
I don't know why
you
you
said
would
that
believe
Barr
it.
himself and the FBI was following up. You said that list was turned into the FBI, and these investigations are working through these things. It's not like these investigations.
Oh yeah, they're giving
No,
him.
for sure.
I don't
I'm
know if
saying
they're
the
giving him straight
Democrats
money.
should come out
Okay.
and be like, yes, absolutely. Please
Yes,
investigate.
okay,
I mean, I
yeah,
guess
you
it
can-
depends on what they believe the merits of the case are. If it's so ridiculous that all this is doing is just tearing the country asunder,
Or
you're
that, yeah,
constantly
okay.
challenging
I don't think
every
they're giving
single
them
part of the
money.
election
I
process.
don't
It
think
can
they
only-
do, but like,
it can
yeah,
only do the
if of course, if
That's
like
not
Trump
true.
comes up
You
to
can
me
draw
and says,
stuff
we
like
need
that-
these
like this
lists,
for
whatever.
years.
Of course, they should give it over.
No, until they can't
But-
find any evidence of anything, and then
If Trump
Biden
is
wins
like,
the
How,
electoral
making a
how
college.
bunch of dumb
long
shit,
did we
then
have
it's-
to listen to
okay.
Trump talk about how Obama was from Kenya? Like, they could draw this out for so long.
But there's a
we even have
constitutional
new
process.
Birth there. Sure, there might
It-
be.
it-
But again,
on
legal
January
constitutional
20th
processes can be
on,
years long.
on January 20th, whether or not there's an investigation, there's going to be an inauguration.
Sure.
And the investigation can carry on, and fine, let them draw it out.
Sure.
We went through three and a half years. I mean, we're still technically going through Russiagate because Adam Schiff won't drop it. And here we are. And we all kind of just roll with it. And the Pulitzer Prizes and all the awards. And then we realized it was all of these people testifying under oath. They had no evidence. It didn't happen.
Wait, what thing didn't happen?
So you had the likes of, what was it, like Brennan and Clapper. You had people, Schiff. They were going on TV saying, yes, it happened. We have proof.
Wait, what happened? What is this?
Collusion with
I've
Russia.
heard,
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I've heard a
But
lot
then
of this.
in the skiff, when they were doing the closed-door testimony, it said, oh, no, that's not true. I don't have any evidence. And so that actually got released, I think, in like October or something.
Sure.
The point, I'm not trying to rehash all that. I'm just saying, if I can go through all that, I got no problem saying either we let the investigations happen, and maybe we find something, maybe we don't. But so long as people feel that in good faith we are taking their complaint seriously, we can prevent destabilization of what is already an extremely hyperpolarized
Sure, I can
country.
understand that. You must understand on the other end, though, there is a little bit of frustration with what feels like
Some guy's just
endless
spamming Tim
investigations
Cut
into
No,
nothing
I'm gonna
related
disagree
to
with
things like Hillary Clinton or Benghazi. These things, how many hours of court hearings, how many months did we get drips about Hillary's emails, buttery emails over and over and over and over again? Like,
I'm going to disagree, because I honestly think that if you want every single American to be rightfully enfranchised if they have the right to vote, then you, more than anyone else, you and all of the Democrats should 100% want every possible investigation, because we want this to be true, free, full, and fair for every legal citizen in the U.S.
Sure, and I hope that they do their investigations. I hope they present their cases in front of the courthoses. That's fine. But
there should be an investigation.
Man, the way that all of this is played out, it really does. Even the verbiage they use, it's never when Giuliani's talking. It's never like, I want to ensure that this is a free and fair election. I want to ensure that everybody is. It's like, we think we can find enough votes here to change the outcome of the state.
They straight up asked Sidney Powell. One of that in relief in the Kraken lawsuit was declare Trump the winner.
Yeah, like they're literally asking explicitly, like, this is supposed to be the part they're not supposed to say out loud. You're supposed to keep that quiet. You're trying to, but like, so I'm not saying that like I hope the investigations are blocked if they have merit, but I mean, I would understand why some people would feel a bit salty that investigations get dragged out forever. But
I know a lot of people who are salty about the Russiagate elections, and I think that as with compromise comes one side rolling their eyes while the other side shakes their fist. And
I mean,
better
Flynn was communicating with people in an unauthorized manner before he went to the White House. He literally lied about it.
Lying? I thought you said it was unauthorized. Did he lie about communicating, or was it unauthorized communication?
I believe that he lied about it to the FBI, his communication. That
do you know the story? I think you're walking into a landmine.
Walking into a landmine. Which part of what do you think that do you think Flynn going to prison or being charged with lying to the FBI? Do you think it was illegitimate?
Yes.
Why?
Because he was the acting national security advisor who was communicating with his Russian counterpart.
Then why did he lie to the FBI about it?
Do you know the meeting wasn't a formal investigation? He was hanging out at the White House and they asked him an informal question in passing, and that was the grounds. Did you know that they threatened his son to force a guilty plea?
Why did they?
Did you know that in the notes?
Why did he lie to the FBI?
If you right now lied to me, or what if you lied to Ian? And you didn't know he was FBI.
I'd be so mad.
You think that Flynn was talking to somebody? He had no idea
I'm not saying
he was FBI.
He didn't know he was under investigation. There was no legitimate investigation, and he was asked a passive question by someone who had nothing to do with him.
There was no legitimate. Didn't the FBI and the DOJ both have, or I'm sorry, not the DOJ, the State Department both have a huge interest in Flynn because of his association with Kislyak? I thought that was like a big part that both of them had an issue with. That the State Department didn't want him in the White House because they weren't sure if he was compromised. The State Department, and that the FBI didn't mind if he was there because the FBI wanted to follow him up for a further investigation.
So you're talking politics, not legitimate claims against Michael Flynn.
Okay.
You're talking about Michael Flynn, who came out, and this was a conversation we had the other day with Luke Rutkowski. Michael Flynn came out and basically talked about what the Obama administration had been doing with supplying weapons to rebels. Obama got mad, fires him, tells Trump not to hire this guy, so Trump says, I'm going to hire him. Then they started having, they had these meetings. This was released in, I think it was the Durham probe, I'm not entirely sure. The notes that got released show that there was a meeting between like Sally Yates, James Comey, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, all having this big meeting in which afterwards Sally Yates writes an email to herself explaining what happened. And
what did she explain what happened in that meeting?
She went through grueling detail about how Obama ordered them to make sure everything was on the up and up and done by the book in terms of an investigation of Michael Flynn to some degree.
People try to claim that in that meeting that I think they assert either Obama or Biden. I think asserted that he brought up the Logan Act. Or whatever.
Because
that was not true.
There's a
even
note.
even in the notes that Yates left to herself, it was not true that Biden ever brought up the Logan Act in that particular meeting. It didn't.
So there's notes that say Biden Logan Act ? That's why it was asserted.
Sure, but
I'm not going to take Sally Yates. What's your evidence for that?
There is no evidence for that. That nobody came out and said that, like, oh yeah, like Biden was, this was brought up, the Logan Act was brought up on his behalf or whatever to investigate. I don't think anybody's ever talked about it.
Did you know that notes released by the FBI asked, what should we do? Or what are we trying to do? Get him fired or prosecute?
Okay.
Why would the FBI be trying to get a guy fired?
I think the problem is that, and this is something that gets misconstrued a lot, Trump himself, or maybe it was Barr himself, misconstrued a State Department person's words in terms of what is our goal is to get him fired or prosecute, because there was a huge conflict of interest between the FBI and the State Department over what to do with Flynn. And this is where a lot of the fighting between these two agents came from. The State Department did not want Flynn associated with the White House at all. They wanted him out because they didn't know if he was compromised on it. The FBI didn't care if he stayed there. I shouldn't say didn't care, but they weren't as concerned with that because they thought that they could follow Flynn further up on an investigation. So there was a huge conflict of interest there where we don't know. Do we want to remove now? Do we want to continue to investigate him? That's a fair question to ask. There were two competing agencies that had different goals.
Did you know they threatened his son?
When you say threaten his son, I don't know
if you don't plead guilty, we are going to prosecute your son.
Did his son commit a crime?
I don't know exactly what the full details
were. Well, that seems like really important there because if his son committed a crime, it seems like that would be a pretty important part of
threatening. Look, you're getting somebody on a process crime because in an informal meeting where he was not being investigated, he said he didn't talk to Kislyak. Don't you think that's crazy that you could be standing by a FBI agent and he could be like, you ever talk to a Russian ambassador? And you go, no, you lied. Ha ha, I got you.
An incoming national security advisor would lie to a member working the Federal Bureau of Investigation about contact with a foreign agent? Yeah, that seems crazy to me.
Not in a formal meeting under investigation.
Okay.
He has no obligation to tell anybody anything. In fact, as national security advisor, why would he be giving away his advice and secrets to some FBI agent he doesn't know?
Then why?
Or I'm sorry, he doesn't know, like, in the sense that...
Why is he talking to him at all about it then?
So you're at a party. You're at an informal meeting at the White House.
Where people are asking me, the incoming national security advisor, about my communication with foreign... I probably would say, hey, listen, you know what? I don't think I'm going to talk to you about that. It seems really inappropriate.
Or maybe you're just like, no. Because I don't want this guy to know anything about... I don't know who he is. I don't know what his deal is. We're not in an informal investigation. He wasn't with a lawyer or anything like that. And they asked him a question, and that was the basis for prosecuting him for lying to the FBI.
Why did the judge throw the book at him then? What happened?
Isn't that strange that when the DOJ said, we want to drop this, Judge Sullivan did nothing for a month?
My understanding was that the DOJ said that they wanted to drop it under Barr, and that Barr's reasoning for dropping that is because he said that the State Department themselves were arguing over the FBI about whether or not, about how to deal with Flynn. And the State Department had a person, and I believe it was her own words, I don't remember her name, but she came out and she said, actually, Barr used my statement, because I think the statement had to do with how the State Department was frustrated with how the FBI was pursuing things, but their frustration wasn't that Flynn was innocent, we don't know why the FBI is bullying him. Their frustration was that we don't want you to investigate Flynn, we want him removed immediately. But so
they were trying to pressure the Trump campaign into getting rid of his national security advisor.
Basically, because the State Department didn't want that guy in there because they thought he was compromised. But the FBI was
Trump was the president.
Sure.
Trump was the president elect. He became president. Mm-hmm. It's his right as the duly elected president to appoint his acting national security advisor, whose job is to communicate with his counterpart in other countries.
And I understand that. I'm just saying that there's a reason why there was conflict there, and it wasn't just because Flynn was some innocent passerby and the State Department was trying to exonerate him. So when Barr comes out and he cites that particular statement,
sure. But that's irrelevant to the question at hand. In an informal meeting where Flynn was not with his lawyer or under formal investigation, they asked him if he talked to Kislyak, and he passively said no, and that was it.
What do you think about the what do you think about the reports now that Trump is looking at potentially preemptively pardoning himself or any of his family members? Do you believe in any of this, or?
I don't know. I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility for something Trump to do. But I don't trust a lot of these reports that come from unnamed sources. Ever since we've had that story from Huffington Post, people close to the president say he has no one close to him. I'm just like, these people are just, if Trump comes out and says it, I'll believe it. Trump recently came out at a party and said, we're trying really hard to stand for 4 years, but if we don't, we'll see you in 2024. Good enough for me. When they come out and say an unnamed individual claims, I'm like, sorry, I got very little room for these companies just to make these claims unless I know who the person is. Especially after the fact, like, we've seen many people they hate the president to the point where they'll say whatever they have to say. And there's certainly people who love the president to the point where they'll say whatever they have to say. I want hard evidence when it comes to fraud. I want hard evidence when it comes to the accusations against Trump. When I look at the Michael Flynn scenario, it looks like Barack Obama didn't like Flynn because Flynn was not good to Barack Obama. So they said, we don't want you. Do you know what the reasoning for why the State Department thought he was compromised was?
Why?
In a meeting, he was talking to someone, and they I think it was Yates, perhaps. He was asked, who do you think? Or I'm sorry, in a passive conversation, it comes up that he says, I don't think that Russia is our biggest adversary. I think it's actually China. And that was like, oh no, he thinks he's trying to defend Russia or something. It's like, well, I agree. I think China's a way bigger threat than Russia is. And then all of a sudden, he finds himself being prosecuted for lying to the FBI. For what? Now, I'll tell you what. He got thrown under the bus by Trump and Trump's team, saying he should, and Pence, he shouldn't have lied to us. Oh, it's his fault. And then later they came back and tried to defend him. Trump's not a perfect guy. Far from it. And he made a ton of mistakes. He threw his own guy under the bus, and he should have defended him. But when Bill
seems to have a habit of doing that.
He certainly does. He has a habit of hiring dumb people too. Like
then calling them amazing, then throwing them under the bus.
Oh, I love
He's
it.
Done this with
he does
so many different people. Sessions with Cohen.
That is the Trump administration.
Fires people. It's his job.
No, he should have fired a lot more people. He
didn't
fire people. That was the problem. So look, I think, whether you like Flynn or whatever, when it comes to the DOJ saying we're going to drop it, and a judge started prosecuting. That's scary, man. Look, I'm rather anti-authority. I've never been a fan of the FBI. Going back to the days of Occupy Wall Street, where they ragged them all the time, and it became increasingly weird to me how many of the people I knew at Occupy became defenders of the intelligence agencies.
Sure. More broadly speaking, why do you think that in a federal government where Trump has exerted quite a bit of control, where he's got a lot of his own appointees, like, why does he still run into so many problems in so many of these agencies? Why does it seem like nobody in the White House, even the own people that he puts there sometimes, don't seem to be taking his side on anything?
He does not know how to work the system. He does not know how government works, and he can't make it work. I think, with people like Trump who are business people, when you run a business, for the most part, you're an authoritarian. Your business, your rules, you're the boss. You can fire and hire within certain confines and certain laws.
Why is it that, so when you say that, I feel that 100%. But another important thing about being a business owner, whether you are a supervisor, a manager, a district manager, whatever, or the owner, you never, ever, 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 ever can pass the buck. You can't do it. If you're supervising a shift and your manager comes to you and your manager is like, what happened on this shift? You would never, as a supervisor, say, it was that employee, because it would be your responsibility.
But Trump's the boss.
Every single time. Yeah.
He passes the buck.
Yeah, all the time. Trump will not accept responsibility for anything. It's either the deep state is after him, the Democrats are after him, the FBI is after him, the DOJ is after him, even when he's running through his own appointees in a lot of these institutions over and over and over again.
I agree. Trump's got a habit of when there are certainly circumstances where he has people to blame, and there are certainly circumstances where he should just be a good leader saying, the buck stops with me, I should have done better. And if this person failed, is irrelevant because I'm the one who needs to steer this ship.
For somebody
That's
that
not Trump.
Has been so ineffectual as a leader, so then I guess moving.
I disagree on that.
Why? Do you think are some of his chief accomplishments? I guess under this administration.
I mean, the economy was smashing in 2019. Jim Cramer, the best numbers of our lives.
Which it was from 2013 onwards.
Oh, it was dramatically different. I mean, Barack Obama said you'll need a magic wand to reach 4% growth, and then when Trump did it, he started laughing at him.
I don't know what Barack Obama said. All I know is that everybody can look at the economy. From 2013 onward, we were smashing all-time highs consistently.
Under Donald Trump, growth was better. Unemployment was way lower.
It was good. Unemployment continued to fall, mainly as a result of Federal Reserve monetary policy. But
for sure, and deficit spending. There's a lot of bad things too.
Yep.
But Jim Cramer, the best numbers of our lives.
I don't take anything Cramer says about the economy seriously. He's an entertainer on TV. I don't know what Cramer has to do with. I'm from Trump economic policy. It doesn't really seem like he's done much in terms of being an effective leader, in terms of passing awesome legislation.
He's a president. He doesn't do that.
Well, or championing awesome. He promised a lot.
Dude, the first 2 years under Trump with the Republicans were a complete and total failure. I think the Republican Party is mostly garbage.
Sure, but again, one of the chief things that we elected Trump for was him talking about how he can bring people together and get them to work on things. It seems like he's been more divisive than ever.
First couple of years for Trump, completely awful. Trump divisive, he's been quite a bit. The last few years, there's mostly in the past year, there's been a couple things. Because I said in January, I will never vote for this man. Then the riots happened. And when the riots got close to my family, and I saw what the Democrats were doing, it really made Trump look good by comparison in a lot of ways. So that was.
So you're a single issue voter because riots happened.
Actually, I've literally said that for sure. So I've got family who are incapable of defending themselves, and when the riots broke out in Chicago and the leadership was insane. I mean, one alderman was talking to the Mayor Lori Lightfoot, saying that she was directing the rioters to the neighborhoods and she was nuts and he was cussing at her and screaming. And I get calls from my friends and family saying, 60 miles west of Chicago, the rioters were showing up and nothing was being done about it.
Do you think it's possible that under different federal leadership, maybe the riots would have looked a little different, or do you think they would have played out the exact same way? That if instead of a president that was constantly deriding the movement and constantly
that's irrelevant.
You don't think that matters at all?
I know it doesn't matter because I was at the start of Black Lives Matter when these things erupted. It was under Barack Obama that I got to witness the National Guard pouring into Ferguson.
Sure, but the BLM riots, but the BLM protests and any riots that occurred under Obama were a pittance compared to what happened under Trump. These were the largest scale riots maybe in the history of the world, maybe. In terms
so
of
you're saying Trump is responsible for the riots, but not the economy, even though the riots and the economy both started under Biden. I mean, under Obama.
That's because Trump can't say good words and make the economy do a certain thing.
Why couldn't Obama solve it? Why didn't Obama solve it during his term? It was 2011 when this started. By 2016, he did nothing to stop this problem.
Obama couldn't do much of anything. Obama couldn't even get his own Supreme Court pick through.
Okay? Trump can't do much of anything because he's getting blocked left and right.
Trump has loaded the federal judiciary.
He sure did. McConnell did.
Trump controlled both halves of government and was on the executive branch, and now it's the Supreme Court. How is it like? How can you give a man so much and yet he claims to have so little at the end of the day? What more did he need?
Trump's not a Republican.
Used up.
The Republican Party in 2016, when they controlled the upper and lower chambers, they're establishment
but they were both
politics.
Unified on some issues. For instance, repeal and replace health care. What happened with that?
Yeah, the Republican Party is trash. and Trump doesn't know how to work this, and he didn't have the support he needed. So listen. The point is, I'm not going to blindly defend Obama or Trump. I think the responsibility with the riots fell under Trump. And guess what? Trump had the DHS deputize state and local police in Portland and started arresting the rioters and giving them federal charges to the point where they started running. They started posting blogs saying, like, get out of your houses because the FBI is coming to give you charge comparable to the charges that were just dropped at the state level. When Obama was in charge and the riots were happening, he said if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And then for the next 4 years, because I covered this, I was in Ferguson for a year and a half, back and forth, flying in and out as the riots progressively got worse. And it was then when Darren Wilson got acquitted, I watched the whole street of West Florissant go up in flames. With Trump, we had COVID lockdown, which was implemented for the most part by Democrat governors, and Trump opposed it for the most part. Republican governors opposed it. When the riots broke out, Trump said, I'm going to shut it all down.
And yet the riots under Trump were like 50 times worse than the riots under Obama.
Yes, because a combination of the lockdowns and the pent-up rage going all the way back into the Obama administration.
You don't think any of that rage might have come from the way that Trump talks about any of these issues?
Definitely.
Sure. But what I'm talking about is when the riots happened, there's a combination of things. It's not just the riots. It was, in the last several months, Trump, like, trying to pull troops out of Afghanistan, I started clapping. I'm like, do it, bring it on. And then the Syria stuff too, finding out how they lied. I got the Defense One article. Outgoing Syria envoy admits hiding U.S. troop numbers to trick the American people into keeping soldiers in the Middle East.
We didn't need to trick them. Trump wanted to do it the entire time as well. He's talked about running Syrian oil fields.
Trump initially tried to pull all our troops out, and then there was a revolt between the Democrats and Republicans saying, you can't do this. So then Trump, in hilarious fashion, whether it's good or bad, said, all right, we're going to keep a couple hundred soldiers in here to guard the oil fields. And then all the anti-war progressives just like started laughing and face-palming, like, this dude just blurts out what the American empire is doing when he brags about selling weapons to Saudi Arabia for their war with Yemen. It's like this dude is admitting the war machine exists, and it was. Well,
sure, but this is also the same guy that talks about like killing terrorists and their families and everything too. Like he did
like Obama did. Obama literally did.
I don't think at the same level that Trump has been doing. Again, the first 4 years of Trump's administration have seen more bombings than any other country. We still have wars going on in every single country that we did when Obama left office.
Trump is one of the I think the first president in 4 decades who didn't start a new war.
Well, that's because there's not many countries left to go to war with at this point.
There literally are. Of course, but he didn't do it. And
I mean, that's great, but he's not pulling back. He's continued the wars. We still have troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and
with him trying to remove
Libya.
them. Like, I literally have the Defense One article. They lied to him to keep the troops in Syria. That, I've never been more angry in my life when I heard this.
I will have to read this article. I'm very curious on how the commander-in-chief it's possible because he's stupid to read the intelligence reports. He lied.
Or they lied to him. They gave him bunk information. I don't know how else to put it. They lied to the president.
Because maybe they couldn't fit it in the Crayola crayon pictures.
He straight up said,
the intelligence report.
Quote, we were always playing shell games to not make clear to our leadership how many troops we had there. Jeffrey said in an interview, the actual number of troops in northeast Syria is a lot more than the roughly 200 troops Trump initially agreed to leave in 2019. They lied to the American people to keep us involved in these quagmires in the Middle East when Trump was trying to end it.
Trump's administration has also been involved in lying to the American people. For instance, when he made it harder to report the number of bombings that have gone on, when he's obscured, I don't think we've gotten a report of the troops on the ground released since February, I think, that they stopped publishing those monthly reports. Like, they've made it harder to get information out of the administration related to bombing. Just this idea, this may be a particular thing that happened in Syria, but the idea that Trump is some peaceful guy that just wants to get us out of all the wars.
I don't think he's a peaceful guy. I think he's desperate for votes.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'll take it. When Trump says the American people hate the wars, and that's true, he says, I'll get the troops out. And then the machine, the establishment, the deep state, whatever we don't call it, go, egad, we must keep our troops in the oil fields.
But he still is engaging in all of the classic war hawky behaviors. If it would have been Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Biden that would have killed Soleimani, I think the right would have erupted. Like, oh, why are you assassinating
you're totally
these people?
Correct.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And when we're still making these massive figure deals to Saudi Arabia for bombs, when we're still involved in stuff in Yemen, 100%. I think that people would still be. I don't see anybody that I'm not going to sit here and defend Obama's record on foreign policy because I think there were definitely mistakes made.
Probably one of the worst we've ever had in the presidency.
Potentially. However, this idea that somebody would be like, I don't like war hawks, so I'm voting for Trump on his foreign policy is that's crazy to me. Like, how many wars...
Pulling our troops out of the Middle East?
But that's not even what he did. He didn't.
He tried.
And while
he tried several times. He's doing it
while
now.
he was trying to, he was also escalating tensions across the entire world with so many other countries.
Very problematic.
Like he almost supported a coup in Venezuela. I think when he kept trying to recognize, or not Venezuela. I'm sorry, in Bolivia when he kept trying to recognize.
Democrats did that too.
Regardless, Trump did as well. He warmed up, or he troubled our relations.
So then
further
criticize
with Cuba,
Biden for the same thing.
Sure. No, you can't though, because when
they were
Biden,
all in favor of.
When Biden has talked about that, but even if that was true, first of all, Biden has published tons of op-eds talking about how he wants to give an approach to foreign policy. Now we can say maybe he's lying in all of that, sure. However, so we have a risk that everything that Biden has said on foreign policy might be a lie, which is possible, but we know that Trump is going to continue the same disastrous foreign policy that has been, a staple of American foreign policy for the last 20 years. Of course, it's true.
Trump just purged the Pentagon leadership in order to force a withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Well, we'll see if it happens because he's been talking about a withdrawal from Afghanistan since the day he took office.
And they were refusing, and they were lying to him.
Look. This is the one area. Trump is the commander in chief. If he can do anything, it's moving troops around. If he had the political will to do it, it would be done.
I will take an incompetent attempt at pulling our troops out several times over the legacy of the Obama-Biden administration with everything they did. Extrajudicial assassinations, the prosecution of more journalists and whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than all other presidents combined, getting us involved in.
And how do you feel about why is if this is so important to you? Firstly,
Trump should pardon Assange and Snowden.
Yeah, why he hasn't made any effort to do that at all?
I know, and he should.
And Trump has also been constantly battling the media as well, saying he's going to open up libel lawsuits. He's going to start threatening them with suing them if they publish mean things about them. He's right.
No. He's right that we need to overturn Times v. Sullivan. Completely think we have to. You know what Times v. Sullivan is?
I know very well. It's very important to what I do as a content creator. It established the malice standard, I believe, or the actual malice for defamation. It is one of the most important protections of a public figure in the United States.
It allows the media to say whatever they want about you.
It prevents a chilling effect from being created on the media where they can't publish an article about somebody because if something comes out and it turns out that that's incorrect, then they could be sued for it.
No.
Yes.
It's Times v. Sullivan, it was the actual malice standard, meaning you had to know.
You have to knowingly publish false information about somebody. The reason why that standard is so important is because right now, let's say that it comes out that, let's say that somebody's doing an investigation on it, and it turns out they think that I killed like 3 or 4 people, they've got a decent amount of evidence, blah, 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 blah. Let's say that they publish that, and it turns out that I'd ordered somebody else to do it, or it wasn't exactly like that. Well, now I can sue them for defamation. But what happens then to media organizations then? Well, now I never want to report on a public figure, because if I'm wrong, I'm going to get sued for it.
I'll half agree with you then. I'll say we need reform. We certainly do.
What reform?
So right now you have, look at Covington, right? The arguments for why Nicholas Sandmann, they were allowed to defame him and be wrong was because he was an involuntary public figure, which gave them the Times v. Sullivan standard. They settled. In fact, a lot of the cases, the right will tell you, a celebration, these $250 million lawsuits were settled, they won. They won probably, as some people said, nuisance fee, maybe a little bit more, meaning it was cheaper to just pay them out, not deal with it.
Sure.
But a lot of the challenges that were brought forward were dismissed because involuntary public figure. We need a better standard than this. Look, I think you're right. I think I should walk back what I said because I probably was wrong in that initial statement because the assumption is in good faith. Mm-hmm. If I read a news article from Defense One that says Jim Jeffrey did X and I then report that, I shouldn't be able to be sued for that if it turns out Defense One was incorrect.
Sure.
But that's not what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is like the Today Show published outright lies about me and masked it with framing device language. And what am I supposed to do to go up against NBC Universal when they put my face on the Today Show and claimed I was pushing conspiracy theories, which was just total BS.
Wow.
I can't do anything about it.
Sure. I don't know specifically which conspiracy theories that they claimed.
They claimed that because I reported on the Fox Business article about Seth Rich, I was pushing a conspiracy theory that Seth Rich leaked documents to WikiLeaks, which then got picked up by other outlets who claimed I was claiming that Seth Rich was murdered because he leaked. So they just all start lying and playing this game of telephone. I can't do anything to stop.
Sure.
50,000 websites all writing garbage. It's impossible.
That is frustrating. I can acknowledge that as somebody that's also been maligned publicly. But we were talking a little bit before the show for a bunch of insane stuff that people say about me. It does suck, but it's one of those things. I don't think I want to get into Citizens United. It's one of those rulings.
Not a fan of that either.
Sure. It's one of those rulings that's rough, but the other side of it, I think, looks worse.
Can't we have some kind of reform for the internet age?
I don't know. It's hard because the problem is that the reason why that actual malice standard exists is to avoid what's called a chilling effect.
Right.
And the idea is that people are going to stop publishing things about powerful public figures if they feel like they can just get sued for publishing something that they don't like to read right now, right? So if I want to sue you for defamation, I need to be able to prove like that you knowingly publish, which is almost an impossible standard to me.
Which is the problem.
Yeah, but the problem is that so the flip
I got
side
a
of that
solution
law,
for you.
Oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
You should be able to sue, and if you can prove that what they published was false, they must issue a retraction.
You can do that, but
doesn't exist right now.
I'll take a hot take here that I'm sure the majority of your audience disagree on. Most media outlets will retract stories that are completely and totally patently false.
It's not true.
I could be wrong, but I feel like if you would actually email anybody that published a certain story,
I work for these
to
companies.
Sure,
I've been in the Slack chats with these conversations. You know what they say? Just wait for it to go away. I was in a meeting.
Were you in Slack chats for what, Breitbart and the Daily Caller, or because
ABC News,
ABC and CNN? These guys publish like updates.
News.
These guys
That's why you know I worked for ABC News and Univision, correct?
Sure.
And I was in the Slack chats where they said, "Wait for it to go away. Don't talk about it. We don't want to get called out for what we do."
I guess it's just interesting to me because on any story that I read that's like more than a week old, you'll usually always see that they are updating articles or they are clarifying information.
Do you know that stealth edits are so frequent that an MIT project was born called News Diffs to track how often news articles from every major publication surreptitiously change the content of their articles?
What is this supposed to?
When news, if New York Times issues a statement, right, and they say Betsy Kitty is a white cat,
okay,
and then it turns out she's actually both white and black,
okay,
they would say, correction, update, editor's note, a previous version of this article said X.
Sure.
They don't do that 99% of the time. It's called stealth editing, and a website was created called News Diffs to show you everything they've done. And there are some seriously messed up things you can track, where news outlets publish overt lies. The story goes viral, and then a day later, completely change the article, destroying all the evidence that ever existed. Well, things can get archived now.
I would be very interested in seeing...
Wait, archives have been a thing forever.
I can't think of anything offhand.
I can give you a specific example where Dave Weigel of the Washington Post published a completely fictitious story about Kim.com hacking Seth Rich's Gmail account to plant evidence that he was the leaker. And then when he got, I'll just put it this way, to be very careful of litigation, 6 months later, the entire story was changed to become hypothetical.
Does it write in the article that did they reflect it accurately in the text, saying that like we?
They never said they updated it.
They never said they.
Nope.
Okay, I'll look into it after. I just don't.
And it's up on. It's something I've cited
I bet you
over
this
and
is
over
totally
again
fucking
from
bullshit.
News Diffs.
But like, it's impossible to tell them right now. I bet you this is totally fucking bullshit. Because websites, any website you go to will say updated this day, updated this day, and you can go back and look and find archives.
For 2 years, and actually got 2 retractions from Politico and the Daily Beast. I tracked them down, and I got two journalists at each of those outlets to retract their versions of that story, because the Washington Post fabricated the whole thing. Happens all the time. There was an instance where, are you familiar with Blair White?
Yes.
Do you think Blair White is a white nationalist?
Probably not.
Just no.
Not overtly. She's pretty conservative.
Conservative is not white nationalist.
I just haven't followed her recently, so I don't know 100%.
The Verge wrote a hit piece accusing Blair of being a whole bunch of things she isn't. And when she tweeted, "I'd like a retraction," they doubled down and added a whole bunch of out-of-context BS. Like, you've been victim to a lot of the same stuff.
Sure.
So you get it. Yeah, these outlets have no intention of correcting if they don't have to.
Yeah, I guess when I'm thinking of like retractions or whatever, I'm thinking of like more like a reporting of a matter of fact. So the Kim.com thing is interesting. I don't know if I would ever push somebody for a retraction on like, like you called me a white nationalist. Because I imagine somebody could make that claim about me, and I would say like, well, I don't think that's true. And they could probably publish like a paragraph of like, well, you said this or this or this or this. And it's like, okay, well, this is more a matter of interpretation, I guess, or argument, because some people might think you're a white nationalist if you ever do like a particular thing or say a particular thing. I guess I'm more interested in like matters of fact or statements of fact when it comes to like retractions, rather than like the author said that this person has this political ideology, which is like a very fluid whatever thing. Not to say that's
crazy.
Right,
that's meaningless too.
What?
It's really the accusing someone of having an ideology.
Well, the problem is that a lot of this stuff becomes so vague. Like, so for instance, like people will call you a white nationalist if you have like Blue Lives Matter on your profile, which is ridiculous.
Here's my favorite. Boston Globe wrote that this one guy was a white nationalist, and when I reached out to him and said, "Whoa, I didn't realize this dude was a white nationalist," I was like, is there something he specifically said? Because this guy's only ever talked about like Trump and America and stuff. And he said, he's a nationalist, right? I was like, yeah. Is he a white guy? Right. Okay, so he's a white nationalist. Sure. And I was like, dude, come on.
Sure, which is really dumb.
Yes. And that was Boston Globe. The problem with news is I think it's no longer being supported.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's from 2012. I worked for Vice I was a founding member of Vice News. I worked for Fusion, which was ABC News Univision. I worked out of the ABC building in New York. I was told in timeout. I was told by the president.
Timeout what?
The website timed out. It didn't.
Okay,
I'm trying to load the
no problem.
article history. I was told, in a matter of speaking, to lie on more than one occasion. That if there is a certain bit of news reporting that's true, but would be offensive to our audience, we don't report it. We side with the audience. That's what I was told to do.
Can you give me like not a specific example, but like what's like a general example of that? What do you mean by that?
Let's say there's two guys in the street, Proud Boy and Antifa, and Antifa walks up and punches the Proud Boy in the face. If I reported that Antifa punched a Proud Boy in the face, it would be offensive to our audience. We don't report it. We have to side with the audience, which means when the Proud Boy got back up and punched Antifa back, that's what we report. Proud Boy attacks Antifa. We ignore the previous context. There was a video that went viral from one of these progressive news outlets where there was a woman at a Trump rally and she punched a Trump supporter in the face and then got pepper sprayed. They did this clever edit where you see the crowd and you see her yelling, and then there's a white flash and then you see her being pepper sprayed. They did a white flash to cover up the fact that she punched a guy in the face, and then was sprayed in self-defense, which was, I think pepper spray is much more measured when than punching someone in the face.
Depending on, but yeah, sure.
Right. So these kinds of things happen all the time. It's basically why after I left Fusion, I tried quitting within a year when I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to work for this garbage. They wouldn't let me. I was under contract, and when I left, I actually went around to all of these big companies. I started before they had the Vice News vertical, like the dedicated YouTube channel.
Holy.
And I had to negotiate with them for like 6 months to actually do it. They didn't want to do on the ground field reporting live or anything like that. Eventually they agreed because there were people like Rocco Castoro, who's working with me now, and some other people at Vice who were like, listen to this dude. He's doing amazing stuff with mobile live streaming. They agreed. They created this news outlet, and then all of these digital media companies wanted to hire me and were offering me ridiculous money. I ended up working for ABC. It was gold, and then golden handcuffs. At first they said we want to do real news. Then they said no, we don't. We want to make money, basically. So we're going to become a progressive news outlet. Then all the reporting I did, which was conflict, crisis, and very middle of the road, gone. I tried quitting. They wouldn't let me. When I left, I basically had every company saying, come have a meeting with us. I got told by a couple of these companies, tell me what you want to do and we will give you a budget. You can do it. And then I saw the people working there. I saw the things they were producing, and I said, what the happened to these people? And so I said no. I started making YouTube videos. That's it. Media is you see what happened with Barry Weiss?
That's it. Now I won't take off my beanie.
She was opinion editor, I think, and she quit, saying that it's basically become a woke fest where it's like, write what we want or else. They forced the resignation of one of the opinion editors because Tom Cotton wrote that op-ed saying send in the troops when it came to the riots.
Okay.
That's where news is going. They're gonna stealth edit. They're not gonna issue corrections, and they're ideologically driven. The gist of my story.
Do you think that this problem exists in alternative media, or do you think they're freer from that than mainstream media?
I think alternative media has similar but slightly different problems. The main problem, which does exist in independent channels that are corporations, is the editorial guidelines of you must report X. So at the New York Times, for instance, they had a mandate. We're going to focus on Trump. When it was looking like the Trump term was coming to an end, they said, we're going to shift now to, it was Russiagate. The New York Times had, I'm forgetting the names of Dean Bearcat or whatever. He said, we're going to focus on Russia. Once the Russiagate was coming to an end, he said, okay, now it's going to be Trump is racist. That's the main driving force. Which means that if you had someone who had evidence to present that was contrary to that, they were being mandated at a top-down level not to report that stuff or not to focus on it at the very least. That's a problem. On YouTube, however, you exist and I exist. And there's echo chambers for sure because people like getting their confirmation bias. But imagine going to one website where you can hear you and me at the same time. Doesn't exist on Breitbart, doesn't exist on MSNBC. So independent social media, or I should say YouTube, is way better than the existing media infrastructure for sure.
I guess the problem that I have with a lot of alternative media, so this would include people like you or me,
why is there a cat?
Veritas, or any of these other types
thank
of
you for
YouTube
cat.
Online entities, is it feels like there is no accountability if you get something wrong. It feels like there is more, regardless of any of the problems that exist in mainstream media, of which I'm sure there are a plethora, it feels like at least there's some accountability where if somebody messes up and it's made public, somebody is going to get fired or something bad is going to happen as a result to it. It also feels like a lot of these companies have a much higher vested interest in not reporting something completely factually incorrectly, because if they do, they would get in massive trouble for it and it would hurt their reputation and the bottom line. Whereas it feels like in alternative media, it feels like the goal is to just report. You can get as much wrong as you want, but as long as you're serving like a particular ideological narrative. It feels like that ideological drive is much more prevalent in alternative media than it is in
true.
At least there's some accountability to get.
I disagree. When I worked for, well, not Vice at the time, but Vice definitely now. One of the things I started seeing, especially working at the ABC building and at the Univision building, both. I worked at both buildings at different periods. Completely ideologically driven. They told us outright, our audience is young, progressive, and that's our goal. That's who we're targeting. So side with them. That's it. That's your mandate. So when I came to them and said, okay, well, I don't want to do
like
that,
a signed
they said,
affidavit.
well, then you can't, work with us. Aside from the fact that they were super racist too, which, one of the reasons I don't like the critical race theory stuff or the critical theory stuff. But there was basically, if you're progressive, you're good. If you're not, we're not going to report it. So they basically, is the craziest thing. I worked for this major, massive media conglomerate, and I was producing content on my YouTube channel with their money. And they were like, just put our logo on it. Okay? Because they didn't want to run my stuff on their channels, even though my content got more views than anything they produced. And when they did produce stuff, and I told them, like, I can help you identify the content that is good, that will go viral, funny jokes, short films. They didn't like it because
when will he bring
one of
up
the things
how
that got
unbelievably
promoted,
wrong
this is a funny story. I'll try to keep it simple because I don't want to get people fired from their jobs or anything like that. But there's a segment called Open Mic Massacre,